Cole Mercer had sworn he'd never draw again, but the man bleeding out in his arms wasn't giving him that choice. Wade Holloway, the only friend he had left in this world, gasped his last breath before Cole could even ask who did this. Now an entire territory wanted Cole's neck in a noose, his reputation painting him guilty before he could speak a word. The guns felt heavier on his hips than they had in years, and the town closing in around him smelled like fear and gunpowder. Sometimes the past doesn't let you bury it. Sometimes it buries you. Before we begin, I invite you to follow this story to the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale travels. The desert wind carried dust and regret in equal measure. Cole Mercer sat his horse at the crest of a low rise, looking down at the scattered buildings of Redemption Flats. The town wasn't much. A wide main street flanked by false-fronted buildings, a scattering of houses beyond, and the skeletal outline of a church that looked like it had given up halfway through being built. Mountains rose blue and distant to the west, promising nothing but harder country beyond. He'd ridden 3 weeks to get here, following a letter that had found him in a Colorado mining camp. Wade Holloway's handwriting had been unmistakable. Big looping letters that spelled out a simple invitation. Come west. Got land. Got cattle. Need a partner I can trust. Cole had read that letter a dozen times, feeling something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Hope, maybe. Or just exhaustion from running. For 8 years he'd been Cole Mercer, the name spoken in low voices across a dozen territories. Fast draw. Killer. The man you hired when talking failed and violence became the only language left. He'd never wanted the reputation, but once you killed your first man in self-defense, the world had a way of deciding what you were worth. Pretty soon the only work available was the kind that required a gun and a willingness to use it. He'd tried to walk away before. Tried ranching in Kansas, tried prospecting in Nevada, even tried his hand at honest labor on a freight line. But his name always caught up with him. Someone would recognize his face or hear his name spoken careless, and then the challenges would start. Young guns looking to build their own reputation, old enemies with long memories, men who just couldn't abide the idea of Cole Mercer living peaceful while their brothers or sons were dead. So he'd kept moving, kept the past at arm's length, and tried not to think too hard about what kind of man he'd become. But Wade's letter had felt different. Wade knew what Cole was, had known him before the reputation took root. They'd ridden together in the war, 2 boys barely old enough to shave, fighting for a cause that seemed important at the time. Wade had gone home after Appomattox and built something. Cole had drifted until the drifting became his whole life. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe with Wade, in country where nobody knew his face, he could finally put down roots. The town looked quiet as Cole rode in, too quiet for mid-afternoon. A few men stood outside the saloon, watching him with the kind of careful attention that made his spine tighten. A woman swept a porch, but stopped when his shadow fell across her steps, broom frozen mid-stroke. Cole kept his hands visible, resting easy on the saddle horn. His guns rode under his coat, a matched pair of Colts that felt like part of his body after so many years. He didn't touch them, didn't let his eyes linger too long on any one person, just kept his horse moving steady down the main street. The sheriff's office sat next to a dry goods store, its door hanging open to catch the breeze. Cole dismounted, tied his horse to the rail, and stepped up onto the boardwalk. Inside, a man sat behind a desk with his boots propped up, reading a newspaper that was 3 weeks old, judging by the date. He was maybe 50, with iron gray hair and a face carved by wind and sun into something hard. The star on his chest caught the light from the window. "Help you?" The sheriff didn't look up from his paper. "Name's Cole Mercer. I'm looking for Wade Holloway. He wrote me about some land west of here." The newspaper lowered slowly. The sheriff's eyes were the color of creek ice, and they fixed on Cole with an intensity that made his hand want to drift toward his hip. "That's so." Not a question. The sheriff swung his boots off the desk and stood up in one smooth motion. He was taller than Cole expected, wide across the shoulders. "And when exactly did Wade write you this letter?" 6 weeks back, maybe 7. I was working up in Colorado when it found me." Colorado. The sheriff walked around the desk, moving with the kind of careful balance men develop when they've lived with violence long enough to respect it. "Long ride. Wade's an old friend. Letter said he needed help with something." "I'll bet he did."
The sheriff's hand rested on his own gun, not threatening but present. Ready. "You carrying, Mercer?" Cole unbuttoned his coat slowly, showing the matched Colts. "I am." "Figured. You know how to use those?" "I do." "Killed men with them?" Cole held the sheriff's gaze. "When I had to." Something shifted in the room, a tension pulling tight like a rope about to snap. The sheriff's jaw worked, grinding teeth, thinking.
Behind Cole, the doorway darkened as someone else stepped into the office. "Sheriff Tate?" A young deputy, barely 20, with nervous eyes. "Everything all right?" "Fine, Coleman. Just having a conversation with Mr. Mercer here." Tate's eyes never left Cole's face. "He's come looking for Wade Holloway." The deputy's expression changed, surprise mixing with something else. Suspicion, maybe? Or fear. "Sheriff," Cole said carefully, "if there's something I should know, Wade Holloway's dead." Tate's voice was flat, giving nothing away. "Found him 3 days ago out at his ranch, shot through the back." The words hit like a fist to the gut. Cole felt the room tilt slightly, the floor uncertain under his boots. "What happened?" "That's what I'd like to know." Tate moved closer, and now his hand was definitely on his gun. "Man rides into town claiming to be an old friend, just happens to arrive right after Wade gets murdered. You can see how that looks suspicious."
"I had nothing to do with it." Cole's voice came out harder than he meant. "Wade was my friend. I came here because he asked me to." "Show me this letter." Cole reached into his coat slowly, pulled out the worn envelope, and handed it over. Tate read it quickly, his expression not changing. "This doesn't prove anything. Could have written it yourself."
"Why would I?" "Because Wade was working on something before he died. Something that had some powerful people nervous. He was asking questions about cattle rustling, about who really controlled the range rights west of here. Then suddenly, an old army friend shows up, a man with a reputation as a killer, and Wade ends up dead." Tate folded the letter and didn't hand it back. "Makes a man wonder if maybe Wade hired you for one kind of work and then had second thoughts." Cole felt anger rising hot in his chest. "You're reaching." "Am I?" "Tell me, Mercer, what do you do for a living?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. "I work." Cole kept his voice level. "Different jobs, whatever needs doing." "Ever hire out your gun?" Cole didn't answer, didn't need to. The silence said enough. "Right." Tate's smile was cold. "So a hired killer shows up in town right when my deputy's investigation gets him murdered, and I'm supposed to believe it's coincidence?" "Deputy?" Cole looked at the younger man. "Wade was a deputy?" "Part-time," Coleman said quietly. "Sheriff Tate deputized him 2 months back to help look into the rustling. Wade was good at it, knew the range, knew the brands, knew who was supposed to be where." "And now he's dead," Tate finished. "So you can understand why I'm not inclined to just let you walk around town free." Cole's hand moved without thinking, dropping toward his gun. He stopped himself halfway, forced his fingers to open, to rise away from the Colt. But the damage was done. Both Tate and Coleman had their weapons drawn now, hammers cocked. "Don't," Tate said softly. "I've heard about you, Mercer. Heard you're fast. But there's 2 of us and 1 of you, and I promise you won't make it out of this room." Cole slowly raised his hands. "I didn't kill Wade." "Then you won't mind staying in town while I sort this out. You'll surrender your weapons, take a room at the hotel, and make yourself available for questions. You try to leave, I'll assume guilt and act accordingly." Tate gestured with his gun. "Now unbuckle that belt, real slow." The rage in Cole's chest burned hotter, but he forced it down. Fighting now would only prove Tate right. He unbuckled his gun belt with careful movements and laid it on the desk. The Colts looked strange there, separated from him. He felt naked without them. "Where's Wade buried?" Cole asked. "Cemetery on the north edge of town. Why?" "I'd like to pay my respects." Tate studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Coleman, walk with Mr. Mercer. Make sure he finds his way without incident." Outside, the afternoon sun felt too bright, the street too exposed. Cole walked beside the young deputy, aware of the eyes watching from doorways and windows. News traveled fast in small towns, and by now everyone would know that Cole Mercer, the gunfighter, had arrived right after Wade Holloway's murder. The cemetery sat on a low hill where the wind came clean off the mountains. Wooden crosses and simple headstones marked the graves of men and women who'd tried to build lives in hard country. Some had succeeded long enough to die old. Others hadn't been so lucky. Wade's grave was fresh dirt, the cross still new. Someone had carved his name deep into the wood. Wade Holloway, 1847 to 1884. No fancy words, no beloved father or devoted husband, just a name and the years that bracketed his time on earth. Cole stood there while the wind pulled at his coat, trying to make sense of it. Wade had been alive 6 weeks ago when he wrote that letter. Had been building something, planning something, hopeful enough to invite Cole into it. Now he was bones and dirt and nothing more. "Did you know him well?" Coleman asked quietly. "Long time ago. We rode together in the war." Cole's voice was rough. "Lost touch after. Life took us different directions. He was a good man, fair, honest." The deputy kicked at a clod of dirt. "This country needs more men like Wade and fewer like—" He stopped himself. "Like me," Cole finished. Coleman had the grace to look embarrassed. "I didn't mean that." "You meant exactly that, and maybe you're right." Cole looked at the fresh grave, at the name carved in wood. Wade tried to be something better than what the war made him. "I just kept being what it taught me to be." They stood in silence for a while, the wind making the crosses creak. "What was he investigating?" Cole asked. Coleman glanced back toward town, nervous. "Sheriff Tate said not to. Wade was my friend. I have a right to know what got him killed." The young deputy wrestled with it, loyalty to his sheriff against something else. Maybe the same sense of justice that had drawn Wade into the investigation. Finally he spoke, voice low. "There's a ranch west of here called the Voss place. Big spread. Been here 20 years. Old man Voss built it from nothing. Ran it with an iron hand until he died 5 years back. Left it to his son, Jack Voss." Coleman paused. "Jack's not like his father. He's ambitious, hungry, wants to control the whole range, not just his own piece of it. And Wade thought he was behind the rustling?" Wade thought it was bigger than just rustling. Small ranchers were losing cattle, sure, but they were also losing water rights, getting squeezed out of traditional grazing areas, finding their fences cut and their stock scattered. Anyone who pushed back found themselves facing legal trouble or worse. 3 men have died in the last year under suspicious circumstances. "And the law did nothing?" Coleman's face darkened. "Sheriff Tate does what he can. But the Voss family has money, connections. They donate to the church, pay for town improvements, employ half the men in the territory, cross them, and you'll find yourself without friends real fast." So Wade was fighting a war nobody wanted him to fight. Wade believed in right and wrong, simple as that. When he saw what was happening to the small ranchers, he couldn't look away. Coleman's voice held something like admiration. He started documenting everything: missing cattle, damaged property, intimidation tactics. He was building a case, gathering evidence that could bring formal charges. And someone decided to stop him before he could. That's what Sheriff Tate thinks. But proving it— The deputy shook his head. "Jack Voss was in town the day Wade died, witnesses putting him at the bank during the time of the murder. His men all have alibis too. Nobody saw anything, nobody heard anything. Wade just turned up dead at his ranch with a bullet in his back." Cole looked at the grave, at the raw earth that would settle and grass over and eventually erase all sign that Wade Holloway had fought for anything at all. "Take me to his ranch," Cole said. "I can't do that. Sheriff's orders. I'm not running. I'm not leaving town. I just want to see where it happened." Cole met the deputy's eyes. "You said Wade was a good man. Don't you want to know the truth?" Coleman wavered, pulled between duty and something deeper. "If Sheriff Tate finds out, then don't tell him." They rode out of town as the sun started its slow descent toward the mountains. Wade's ranch sat 5 miles west, tucked into a valley where a creek ran year-round. It was good land, the kind that could support a decent herd if worked right. The kind of land Wade had dreamed about during the war, when they'd been cold and hungry and convinced they'd never see home again. The ranch house was small but solid, built from logs with a stone chimney at one end. Corrals stood empty, the gates hanging open. Wade's horse was gone, probably taken by whoever found the body. The wind made the whole place feel abandoned, haunted by absence. Cole dismounted and walked slowly toward the house. The door was unlocked. Inside, everything sat exactly as Wade must have left it. A half-eaten meal on the table, going moldy. A book open on a chair. Coffee gone cold in a tin cup. "They found him out back," Coleman said from the doorway, "near the woodpile." Cole walked through the house looking for signs of struggle, for anything that might explain what happened. Wade's bed was made neat. His few possessions were organized with military precision, old habits from the war. On a shelf above the fireplace sat a daguerreotype in a cracked frame, two young men in Union blue trying to look brave. Cole recognized himself in Wade, barely 18, the war still an adventure. He picked up the frame, studying the faces of those boys who'd had no idea what was coming, who'd thought they were immortal. "What are you looking for?" Coleman asked. "I don't know yet." Cole set the frame down carefully and moved to Wade's desk. Papers covered the surface. Bills of sale, brand registrations, hand-drawn maps of the territory, and underneath it all, a leather journal. Cole opened it. Wade's handwriting filled the pages, documenting everything Coleman had described and more. Dates, times, locations, cattle counts that didn't match bills of sale, fence lines moved in the night, water sources mysteriously poisoned, and through it all, patterns emerging, patterns that pointed to a systematic effort to drive out the small ranchers and consolidate control. One name appeared again and again, Voss. "He was thorough," Cole said quietly. Wade was always thorough. Military training. Coleman came closer, looking at the journal over Cole's shoulder. "Sheriff Tate has been through all this. Couldn't make anything stick. It's all circumstantial, nothing concrete enough to bring charges." Cole flipped through the pages, reading Wade's careful notes. Then, near the end, something different, rough sketches of brand marks with notes about alterations. Wade had been tracking how cattle were being rebranded, disguising their origin. It was careful work, the kind that took skill and planning. The last entry was dated 3 days before Wade died. "Met with CV tonight. She confirms my suspicions about the rustling operation, but won't testify. Too afraid. Says her brother will kill her if she talks. I need more proof, something undeniable. Tomorrow I ride to the North Range where JV's men have been seen working after dark. If I can catch them in the act, document it, maybe CV will find the courage to speak up. This has to end. Too many good people suffering." "CV?" Cole said. "Who's that?" Coleman's face went carefully blank. "Could be anyone." "Deputy?" The young man sighed. "Clara Voss, Jack's younger sister. Wade was friendly with her." Something cold settled in Cole's gut. "How friendly?" "I don't know exactly, but I saw them talking a few times, quiet-like. And once I caught Wade riding back from the Voss ranch late at night." Coleman shifted uncomfortably. "Wade never said anything about it, and I didn't ask. Man's private business is his own." Cole looked back at the journal. Wade had been investigating Jack Voss while involved with Voss's sister, the kind of complication that could get a man killed in about a dozen different ways. "There's more," Coleman said quietly. "Jack Voss has another sister, Nora, younger than Clara, wilder. Word is she hates what her brother's doing but won't stand against him. Family loyalty or fear, I can't say which." The wind rattled the windows, making the house creak. Cole walked to the back door and stepped outside. The woodpile sat undisturbed, split logs stacked neat. 30 feet away, the ground showed dark stains. Blood soaked into the earth. Wade had been shot in the back. Ambushed. Never saw it coming. Cole stood there, trying to picture it. Wade coming out for firewood, maybe, or hearing something in the dark. Someone waiting, hidden. The shot echoing across the valley. Wade falling, dying alone under the stars while his killer rode away. "I'm going to find who did this," Cole said. "That's not your job. You're just supposed to stay in town and what? Wait while Sheriff Tate spins his wheels trying to build a case that won't hold up because everyone's too scared to testify?" Cole turned to face the deputy. "Wade asked me here for a reason. Maybe he knew he was in danger. Maybe he wanted someone who could protect him. Or maybe he wanted someone who could avenge him," Coleman said quietly. "Is that why you're really here, Mercer? You planning to strap those guns back on and start killing?" The question hit harder than it should have, because Coleman was right. There was a part of Cole that wanted exactly that. Wanted to find the men responsible and make them pay in the old way, the fast way, the bloody way. But Wade had been trying to build something better than that. Had been using law and evidence and patience to fight against the kind of violence that Cole represented. No, Cole said finally. I'm not here to kill anyone. I'm here to finish what Wade started. By doing what, exactly? By finding proof, real proof that can't be ignored. Cole started back toward the horses. Wade's journal points to something happening on the North Range. Let's go see what's out there. Now? It'll be dark soon. Good. If someone's working cattle they shouldn't be, they'll be doing it after sundown. They rode north as the light failed, following Wade's hand-drawn map. The land rose gradually, moving into rougher country where the grass grew thick in the valleys and pine trees clung to the ridgelines. Good grazing land, contested territory where boundaries blurred and tempers ran hot. Full dark had fallen by the time they reached the area Wade had marked. Coleman wanted to stop, make camp, wait for daylight. But Cole kept them moving, trusting his horse to find the way and his instincts to warn him of danger. Then, somewhere ahead, a sound that didn't belong to the night. Cattle lowing, nervous, and voices, low and careful, men working in the dark. Cole dismounted and handed his reins to Coleman. Stay here. What are you going to do? What Wade did. Watch and document. He moved forward on foot, letting his eyes adjust to the starlight. The moon was a thin crescent, giving just enough illumination to see shapes but not details. Ahead, maybe 200 yards, he could make out movement. Cattle milling in a makeshift corral, men on horseback working around them. Cole worked his way closer, using the terrain for cover. The cattle were being driven through a narrow chute where two men worked with running irons, altering the brands. It was skilled work, turning a Circle S into something that could pass for the Voss brand if you didn't look too close. Stolen cattle being laundered, their ownership erased and rewritten. He needed to get closer, needed to identify the men. Wade would have taken notes, sketched what he saw, built his case piece by piece. But Wade was dead, and Cole didn't have a journal or the patience for careful documentation. What he had was a lifetime of surviving by reading violence before it happened. And right now, every instinct was screaming that he'd been spotted. The men at the corral were looking his direction, rifles rising. Someone shouted. A gunshot cracked across the valley, the bullet whining off a rock near Cole's head. He ran, staying low, using the darkness and broken ground for cover. More shots followed, wild but getting closer. Behind him, he heard Coleman's horse crashing through the brush, the young deputy either trying to help or running for his life. Cole reached his horse and swung into the saddle as riders came thundering after them. 3, maybe 4 men, close enough now that he could hear their shouts. "Ride!" Cole yelled at Coleman, and they spurred their horses into a dead run. The chase lasted 20 minutes of hard riding, the hunters pushing them east toward rougher country. Cole's horse was fresh and fast, but Coleman's was older, struggling to keep pace. They couldn't outrun pursuit much longer. Then Coleman's horse stepped wrong, leg catching in a prairie dog hole, and went down hard. The deputy flew from the saddle and hit the ground rolling. His horse scrambled up, limping badly, useless for riding. Cole wheeled his own mount around and rode back. The pursuers were close now, maybe 100 yards and closing fast. "Get up!" Cole reached down, Coleman grabbing his arm and swinging up behind. The double weight slowed them immediately, but they were moving again, crashing through brush toward a line of trees that might offer cover. A shot rang out, close enough that Cole felt the air displacement near his ear. Another, and his horse screamed and stumbled. They'd hit it, probably not fatal, but bad enough that the animal was faltering. They weren't going to make it. Cole pulled his horse up hard, the animal grateful to stop. He slid from the saddle, pulling Coleman down with him. "Can you shoot?" Cole asked. The deputy's face was pale but determined. "Well enough. Then get your rifle and find cover. We make a stand here." They moved into the rocks at the base of the tree line, Coleman with his Winchester, Cole unarmed except for a knife. The pursuing riders came into view, 4 of them, spreading out to surround the position. "This is going to go bad fast," Coleman muttered. Cole didn't answer. He was calculating distances, angles, the timing of what would come next. The riders would try to talk first, try to figure out who they'd been chasing and whether killing them would cause more problems than it solved. The question was whether Cole could use those few seconds to turn the situation around. "You boys lost?" One of the riders called out, staying just at the edge of rifle range. "This is private land." "Funny," Coleman shouted back. "I'm a deputy sheriff, and last I checked, rustling cattle was illegal on all land." Silence. Then muttered conversation, the riders conferring. Cole used the moment to move, sliding through the rocks away from Coleman's position. If they started shooting, they'd focus fire on where the deputy's voice had come from. Cole needed to be somewhere else. "You got no authority out here," another rider called. "Sheriff Tate knows better than to mess with Voss business." Voss. So these were Jack Voss's men, confirming everything Wade had documented. Wade Holloway had authority, Cole said from his new position. "That work out well for him?" More silence. Longer this time. The riders were realizing they'd been seen doing something criminal by men who knew Wade's name and maybe knew why he died. "Who the hell are you?" The first rider's voice had changed, uncertainty creeping in. "I'm the man who's going to finish what Wade started." One of the riders laughed, the sound ugly. "You're the gunfighter, Mercer. Heard you rode into town today. Tate thinks you killed Wade." "Tate's wrong. Maybe. Or maybe you're just here to finish the job you started." The rider spurred his horse forward, and the others followed, converging on the rocks. "Either way, you've seen too much." They came in fast, rifles up, and Coleman started shooting. His first shot dropped a horse, sending its rider tumbling. His second and third went wild as he tried to track moving targets in bad light. Return fire shattered the night, bullets whining off stone and tearing through brush. Coleman grunted and fell back, hit somewhere. Cole couldn't see where, couldn't help him yet. He waited, counting breaths, watching one rider dismount and work his way through the rocks toward Coleman's position. The man moved careful, rifle ready, thinking he was the hunter. He was wrong. Cole came out of the shadows behind him, knife already moving. The blade found the man's kidney, punching in and twisting. The rider tried to scream, but Cole's other hand was over his mouth, holding him tight while the life ran out. The rifle fell. Cole caught it, lowered the dying man to the ground, and came up shooting. 2 quick shots, both finding targets. One rider went down clutching his shoulder. Another caught lead in the leg and tumbled from his horse. The last man, the one who'd done all the talking, wheeled his mount and spurred hard for distance. Cole tracked him with the rifle, finger on the trigger. Easy shot. The man who'd probably helped kill Wade, running scared into the dark. He let him go. Killing the man here, now, with only Coleman as witness, that was the old way. The violence Wade had been trying to replace with law and justice. Cole wanted that man alive, scared, running back to whoever gave the orders. Wanted him to spread fear the other direction for once. He turned back to Coleman. The deputy was sitting against a rock, hand pressed to his side, blood leaking through his fingers. "How bad?" Cole asked, kneeling beside him. "Bad enough. Bullet went through, I think. Hurts like hell." Cole tore strips from his own shirt, wadding them against the wound front and back. Coleman hissed but didn't cry out. "We need to get you back to town," Cole said. "Not sure I can ride. Then I'll tie you to a horse if I have to. We're not staying out here." Cole checked the other riders. 2 dead, 1 still breathing but unconscious from blood loss. The 4th wounded but awake and glaring with hate-filled eyes. "Your name," Cole said to the conscious one. "Go to hell." Cole put his boot on the man's wounded leg and pressed down. The rider screamed. "Your name," Cole repeated calmly. "Frank. Frank Carson. Who do you work for, Frank?" "You know damn well who—" Another scream as Cole pressed harder. "Say it." "Jack Voss. I work for Jack Voss. And were you altering brands on stolen cattle tonight?" Carson's face twisted with pain and fear and calculation. He was trying to figure out if the truth would save him or condemn him. Cole helped him decide by pressing down again. "Yes, we were changing brands. It's what we do, what Jack pays us for. Now get your boot off my goddamn leg." Cole stepped back. "You just confessed to rustling cattle. Deputy Coleman heard you. So did I." "Won't matter. Jack will have lawyers, witnesses, a dozen men swearing I was somewhere else. You got nothing." "We've got you, Frank. And we've got 2 bodies and another man bleeding out.
That's 3 witnesses to what happened here, 3 men who can testify about Jack Voss's operation.
Cole looked at the other wounded rider who'd regained consciousness and was listening with wide, terrified eyes. Maybe one of them will decide saving his own neck is worth telling the truth. He left them there, Carson cursing, the other man silent and pale. He caught one of the horses, a good gelding that didn't mind the smell of blood, and helped Coleman into the saddle. The deputy sagged forward, barely conscious, but Cole tied him secure and took the reins. They rode slow through the darkness, Coleman drifting in and out. Cole kept talking to him, keeping him present, keeping him breathing.
"Wade would be proud of you," Cole said at one point. "Wade's dead," Coleman mumbled. "We're probably going to be too." "Not tonight. Tonight we win." Dawn was breaking when they reached Redemption Flats. The town was just waking up, shutters opening, smoke starting to rise from chimneys.
Cole rode straight to the sheriff's office, Coleman barely holding on. Sheriff Tate came out with his gun drawn, saw Coleman, and everything in his face changed. "What the hell happened?" "Jack Voss's men happened. They were altering brands on stolen cattle. Coleman witnessed it, so did I. They tried to kill us to keep us quiet." Cole dismounted stiffly. "Coleman needs a doctor. There's 2 dead and 2 wounded men out on the North Range that need collecting." Tate helped Coleman down, shouting for someone to fetch the doctor. Then he turned back to Cole, and his eyes were hard. "You had no authority to go out there. Coleman neither. This is what Wade died for," Cole said quietly. "He was building a case against Jack Voss, and someone murdered him to stop it. Well, I'm not stopping. Coleman's not stopping. And unless you're working for Voss too, Sheriff, you better not be stopping either." Tate's hand dropped to his gun. "You calling me corrupt?" "I'm calling you scared. Same as everyone else in this town." Cole looked around at the growing crowd, people gathering to see what the commotion was about. "Jack Voss has run things his way for too long, and good men have died trying to stand against him. Wade Holloway tried to do it the right way, with law and evidence, and someone shot him in the back for it. So maybe it's time we ask ourselves what kind of territory we want this to be. One where might makes right, or one where the law actually means something." The doctor arrived, rushing Coleman inside. Tate stood on the boardwalk, jaw working, thinking hard. "I'll ride out to collect those men," he said finally, "and we'll hear what they have to say. But Mercer, you make one more move without my say-so, and I'll put you in a cell. Understood?" "Understood." But Cole knew it was already too late for cells and caution. He'd crossed a line out on the range, had stepped back into the violence he'd been trying to escape. The difference was, this time he wasn't fighting for money or reputation. This time, he was fighting for Wade, for Coleman, for every small rancher Jack Voss had squeezed and every man too afraid to speak up. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning cool. Cole stood in the street while the town watched, trying to figure out what came next. He'd come looking for peace and found a war. Had sworn never to draw his guns again and found himself knee-deep in a fight that would probably require exactly that. Somewhere west of town, Jack Voss was waking up to news that his operation had been exposed, his men captured or killed, his secrets bleeding into the daylight. The question was what he'd do about it, and whether Cole Mercer would survive long enough to see justice done. The doctor worked on Coleman for 2 hours while Cole waited outside, watching the town wake to news that spread like wildfire through dry grass. By mid-morning, everyone in Redemption Flats knew that Jack Voss's men had been caught rustling cattle, that 2 were dead and 2 more wounded, that Deputy Coleman had nearly died, and Cole Mercer, the gunfighter, had saved his life. Cole sat on the bench outside the sheriff's office, feeling the weight of eyes on him from every direction. Some looked curious, others afraid. A few seemed almost hopeful, like maybe this stranger with the deadly reputation might be the one to finally stand up to the Voss family in a way that stuck. He didn't want their hope, didn't want to be anyone's savior or their weapon. But Wade's grave was still fresh, and Coleman's blood was still drying on his shirt, and somewhere out on the range Frank Carson was probably already working out which lies would save his skin. Sheriff Tate rode back into town just before noon with a wagon carrying 1 body and 2 wounded men. The other dead rider had been left where he fell, too far gone to bother moving. Tate's face was carved from stone as he supervised getting the prisoners into cells and the body to the undertaker. When it was done, he walked over to where Cole sat and dropped Wade's gun belt on the bench beside him. Figure you've earned these back, Tate said. For now. Cole looked at the matched Colts, at the worn leather that had shaped itself to his body over years of wearing. He didn't touch them. Carson talking? Cole asked. Not a word. Neither is Pete Hollis, the other one, both claiming they were just night riding, checking on cattle, and we ambushed them. Tate's jaw tightened. Without Coleman's testimony or yours, it's your word against theirs. And the altered brands on those cattle? Haven't found them yet. That whole area is open range, cattle scattered over 20 square miles. By the time we locate the herd they were working, assuming we can, the brands will be healed enough that proving they were changed last night becomes near impossible. Cole felt frustration rising. So they walk? I didn't say that. I said it's going to be harder than I'd like. Tate sat down heavily on the bench, suddenly looking every one of his 50-odd years. Jack Voss has had his lawyer in my office twice already this morning. Man's claiming harassment, unlawful detention, that his employees were the victims of an unprovoked attack by a known criminal, meaning you, and a deputy acting outside his jurisdiction. Coleman's jurisdiction is this whole territory. Legally, yes. Practically? Tate shook his head. Jack Voss owns half the county commissioners. He donates to their campaigns, helps their businesses, makes sure their families are taken care of. They're not going to move against him based on the word of a part-time deputy and a drifter with a violent past, no matter what actually happened out there. Then what the hell are we doing here? Cole's voice came out harder than he intended. Wade died trying to bring Voss down through the law, and you're telling me the law won't touch him? I'm telling you it's complicated. This isn't some frontier town where the man with the fastest draw makes the rules anymore. We've got courts, lawyers, politicians. Justice moves slow, and it moves careful. Wade doesn't have time for slow. Cole stood up, angry energy needing somewhere to go. Neither do the next men Voss decides to kill. And what do you suggest? You going to strap those guns back on and shoot your way to justice? Tate's eyes were hard. Because that's not how this works, Mercer. We do this the right way or we don't do it at all. Before Cole could answer, a woman's voice cut through the tension. Sheriff Tate, I need to speak with you. Cole turned to see a woman standing at the edge of the boardwalk, and for a moment the morning sun seemed to pause around her. She was maybe 25, with dark hair pulled back severe and eyes the color of storm clouds. She wore a simple dress that spoke of money without flaunting it, and she held herself with the kind of rigid control that came from years of practice. Miss Voss, Tate said, and Cole understood. This was Clara, the woman Wade had been involved with, Jack Voss's sister. I heard about what happened last night, Clara said, her voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of something else. Fear, maybe, or anger held in check. I heard Deputy Coleman was injured. He'll live, thanks to Mr. Mercer here. Clara's eyes shifted to Cole, studying him with an intensity that made him want to look away. You're Wade's friend, the one he wrote to. I am. You're too late. He's dead. The words were brutal in their simplicity, but her voice cracked just slightly on the last word. Cole saw her hands tighten on the small purse she carried, knuckles going white. I know, Cole said quietly. I visited his grave. Did you? Not a question. Clara looked at him like she was trying to see past the surface, trying to figure out what kind of man Wade had trusted enough to send for. Wade talked about you sometimes, his war friend, the one who could handle himself in a fight. He exaggerated. Did he? Her eyes dropped to the gun belt on the bench. Those are yours, I assume. Wade told me you were fast, that you'd killed men. Miss Voss, Tate interrupted, if you have information about what happened to Wade, I don't. She said it too quickly, and Cole saw the lie in the way her shoulders tensed. I came to ask about my brother's men. Jack is concerned about their treatment. They were caught altering cattle brands, Tate said flatly. That's rustling. They'll be held until trial. Do you have proof? Actual proof that will hold up in court? The sheriff's silence was answer enough. I thought not. Clara's voice had gone cold now, distant. My brother's lawyer will have them released by tomorrow. And then, Sheriff, you'll need to be very careful about making accusations you can't prove. She turned to leave, but Cole spoke before he could stop himself.
Is that a threat? Clara stopped, looked back at him. It's a reality. My brother controls this territory, Mr. Mercer. He controls the land, the water, the people. Men who fight him end up like Wade Holloway, dead and buried and forgotten. Her voice dropped lower. Go back to wherever you came from. There's nothing for you here but grief. She walked away quickly, not waiting for a response. Cole watched her go, seeing the stiffness in her spine, the way she held herself like she might shatter if she bent even slightly. That's Wade's woman? Cole asked. Was. Tate's voice was sad. Though I don't think she ever admitted it, even to herself. The Voss family doesn't mix with common folk, and Wade was about as common as they come. But he loved her. I think maybe he did. And I think maybe she loved him back, in her way. But love doesn't count for much when it runs up against family loyalty and fear. Tate stood, collecting his hat. I need to check on Coleman. You should get some rest, Mercer. Stay at the hotel. Keep your head down. Let me handle this. But Cole was already thinking about Clara Voss, about the fear in her eyes, and the way her voice had broken when she said Wade's name. He thought about Wade's journal entry, met with CV. Tonight she confirms my suspicions but won't testify. Clara knew something, maybe knew everything, and she was too terrified to speak. The question was what would make her find that courage Wade had hoped for. Cole spent the afternoon walking Redemption Flats, getting a feel for the town and the people in it. Most gave him a wide berth, crossing the street when they saw him coming or ducking into shops until he passed. A few nodded carefully, acknowledging his presence without committing to anything that might be interpreted as friendship or alliance. The general store was run by a thin man named Hutchins, who watched Cole browse with nervous eyes until Cole bought tobacco and coffee and left without incident. The saloon sat mostly empty in the day hours, just a bartender polishing glasses and two old-timers playing cards who stopped their game to stare when Cole walked in. He ordered whiskey, drank it standing at the bar, and left. The town felt like it was holding its breath, waiting to see what happened next. By evening, Cole found himself at the hotel restaurant, picking at a plate of steak and potatoes that tasted like sawdust. He wasn't hungry, but he needed to eat, needed to keep his strength up for whatever was coming. A figure slid into the chair across from him, moving quick and quiet. Cole's hand was halfway to his gun before he registered that it was a woman. Younger than Clara, maybe 20, with the same dark hair but wilder, pulled back in a loose braid with strands escaping around her face. She had sharp features and eyes that burned with something fierce and reckless. You're Mercer, she said. Not a question. And you're the other Voss sister. Nora. She leaned back in the chair, studying him with the same intensity Clara had shown, but without the careful control. I wanted to see what kind of man Wade sent for. A tired one who'd like to finish his dinner in peace. Too bad. Peace isn't on the menu tonight. Nora glanced around the restaurant, then leaned forward, voice dropping. My sister came to warn you off this morning. I'm here to tell you she's wrong. Cole set down his fork, giving her his full attention. About what? About running. About giving up. About letting Jack get away with murder. Nora's hands were flat on the table, steady despite the anger in her voice. Wade Holloway was a good man, better than my brother will ever be, and he died trying to stop something evil. Your brother's rustling operation. That's just the beginning. Jack isn't just stealing cattle, he's stealing futures, stealing hope. Every small rancher he drives out, every family he forces to sell, every man he intimidates into silence, it all adds up to building an empire on other people's suffering. She paused. Wade saw that. Wade fought it. And my brother killed him for it. Can you prove that? Not in a court. Jack was in town when Wade died, surrounded by witnesses. But I know my brother, Mr. Mercer. I know how he thinks, how he operates. He doesn't pull the trigger himself. He has men for that. Men like Frank Carson and Pete Hollis and a dozen others who'd kill for a wage and a promise of protection. Cole studied her, this young woman with fire in her eyes and what looked like a death wish in her reckless honesty. Why are you telling me this? Because Clara won't. Because someone needs to stand up to Jack before more people die. And because Wade trusted you enough to send for you, which means you're either brave or stupid, and either way you might actually have a chance of making a difference. Your sister doesn't seem to think so. Nora's laugh was bitter. Clara's terrified, Has been ever since our father died and Jack took over the ranch. She sees what he's become, hates it, but she's trapped by family loyalty and the fear of what he might do if she crosses him. What might he do? Whatever it takes to protect his empire. Jack's not like our father. Father built the ranch through hard work and fair dealing. He believed in earning respect. Jack just wants power, and he doesn't care who gets hurt in the getting of it. Nora's voice went quiet. He'd kill Clara if he thought she was betraying him. Kill her or worse. Maybe just lock her away somewhere, make her disappear into madness like he did with... She stopped abruptly, like she'd said too much. Like he did with who? Cole pressed. Doesn't matter, that's old history. But her eyes said it mattered very much. What matters is stopping Jack now, before the whole territory becomes his personal kingdom. And how do you suggest I do that? Find proof. Real proof that connects Jack to Wade's murder, or to the rustling, or to any of the dozen other crimes he's committed. Wade was close. His journal had pieces of it. You finish what he started. I don't have Wade's journal. Sheriff Tate has it. Then get it back. Or find new proof. The rustling is still happening. The intimidation is still happening. Jack's men are still out there doing his dirty work. Nora stood up, moving with quick grace. Wade believed the truth would win. I'm not so sure anymore, but if there's even a chance, someone has to try. She was gone before Cole could respond, slipping out of the restaurant like smoke. He sat there for a long moment, thinking about two sisters caught in their brother's shadow, one too afraid to fight, the other too reckless not to. That night, Cole couldn't sleep. He lay in the hotel room staring at the ceiling, listening to the town settle into darkness. Somewhere out there, Frank Carson and Pete Hollis sat in jail cells, probably already working out their stories with Jack Voss's lawyer. By tomorrow, they'd likely walk free, and the whole incident would be written off as a misunderstanding, unless Cole found something that couldn't be explained away. He rose before dawn, dressed quietly, and slipped out of the hotel. The street was empty, the sky just beginning to lighten in the east. He made his way to the sheriff's office, found the door locked, and picked it with tools from his pocket, old skills from old days he'd tried to forget. Inside, he found Wade's journal in a drawer of Tate's desk. He took it, along with the maps and documents Wade had collected. If Tate discovered the theft, Cole would deal with it then. Right now, he needed to see what Wade had seen, understand what Wade had understood. Back in his room, Cole spread the papers across the bed and started reading. Wade's handwriting told a story of systematic crime, rustling operations that moved cattle through a network of altered brands and false bills of sale, all eventually funneling into Jack Voss's growing empire. But there were gaps in the evidence, places where Wade had written question marks or notes like "need confirmation" and "requires witness testimony." One entry stood out, dated a week before Wade died. Talked to Miguel Torres today. He's willing to testify about the fence cutting and water poisoning on his land, but only if others come forward too. He can't stand alone. Jack would destroy him. Need to find more ranchers with courage to speak. Also, Miguel mentioned seeing riders near the old Brennan place 2 nights ago. The Brennan place has been abandoned for months. Why would Jack's men be there? Need to investigate. The Brennan place. Cole found it marked on one of Wade's maps, maybe 8 miles northeast of town. He studied the location, the terrain around it, trying to figure out what interest Jack Voss would have in abandoned property. Then he remembered what Nora had said, the way she'd stopped herself mid-sentence, make her disappear into madness like he did with... What if Jack was already making people disappear? What if the Brennan place was where he kept the inconvenient, the problematic, the witnesses who needed to be silenced without the mess of murder? It was a long shot, built on speculation and half-finished sentences, but it was the only lead Cole had. He was saddling his horse when Sheriff Tate found him. Going somewhere, Mercer? Cole didn't stop working the cinch. Thought I'd do some riding, see the country. That right? Wouldn't have anything to do with the fact that Wade's journal is missing from my office. Cole turned to face him. You going to arrest me for theft? Should I? Tate moved closer, hand resting on his gun. Not threatening, just ready. Or are you going to tell me what you found that's got you saddling up before sunrise? Cole made a decision, pulled the journal from his saddlebag, and handed it over. Wade mentioned an abandoned place northeast of here, the Brennan Ranch. Said he saw Jack's men there and wanted to investigate. The Brennan place has been empty for 2 years. Old man Brennan died.
His widow moved to Denver. What would Jack want with it? That's what I'm going to find out. Tate was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he surprised Cole by nodding. Give me 10 minutes to get my horse. We'll ride together. This isn't your fight, Sheriff. The hell it isn't.
Wade was my deputy. Coleman nearly died. And if Jack Voss is using abandoned property for something illegal, that makes it exactly my fight. Tate's eyes were hard. Besides, you're still a suspect in Wade's murder as far as some folks are concerned. I go with you. At least there's a witness to whatever you find or do. They rode out as the sun cleared the horizon, two men following a trail of questions into country that felt wrong the moment they entered it. The Brennan place sat in a valley that should have been pleasant. Good water, decent grass, protected from the worst of the winter wind. But something about it felt abandoned in a deeper way than just empty buildings. The ranch house was intact but weathered, windows dark and door hanging crooked on broken hinges. The barn leaned slightly, roof sagging. Corrals stood empty, gates rotting on their posts. Doesn't look like anyone's been here in months, Tate said. But Cole was looking at the ground near the barn. Fresh horse tracks, maybe 2 days old, and leading away from the barn toward a root cellar dug into the hillside, a path worn through the grass by recent traffic. Someone's been here, Cole said. They dismounted and approached the cellar carefully. The door was new, heavy wood with an iron lock that looked out of place on a supposedly abandoned property. Cole tried the handle. Locked, solid. Stand back, Tate said, and fired his pistol into the lock mechanism. The sound echoed across the valley, loud enough to carry for miles. If anyone was watching, they knew the sheriff was here now. The lock broke apart. Cole pulled the door open, revealing stairs descending into darkness. A smell rolled out, unwashed bodies, sickness, fear. Christ, Tate breathed. Cole lit a match, held it high, and started down the stairs. The cellar had been modified, expanded beyond its original purpose. What should have been a simple storage space for vegetables had been turned into a makeshift prison. 3 cells had been built from rough lumber and iron bars, and in 2 of them, people huddled in the darkness. The match burned Cole's fingers. He dropped it and lit another, moving closer to the cells. In the first cell, an old man sat on a straw pallet, eyes hollow and uncomprehending. He didn't react to the light or to their presence. In the second cell, a woman pressed against the bars, face gaunt and desperate. Please, she whispered, please help us. Tate was already working on the cell locks with the butt of his gun, smashing them open. The woman stumbled out, barely able to stand. Cole caught her, helped her to the stairs. How long have you been here? Tate asked. I don't know, weeks, months? They took my husband's ranch, said we owed money we didn't owe. When we refused to leave, men came. They took him away, brought me here. Her voice cracked. Is my husband alive? Please, is Henry alive? Tate's face was grim. What's your name, ma'am? Ruth Morrison. Mrs. Morrison, when did they bring you here? October, I think, maybe November. It's hard to remember. 5 months. They'd kept this woman locked in a cellar for 5 months. Cole helped the old man out of his cell. He moved like a sleepwalker, unresponsive to questions or touch. Whatever had been done to him had broken something fundamental. This is how Jack Voss handles problems, Tate said quietly. People who won't sell, who won't leave, who might testify against him. He makes them disappear. Not killed, just erased. Wade must have figured it out, Cole said. That's why he wanted to investigate. And that's why they killed him before he could. They got both prisoners up into the daylight. Mrs. Morrison wept, covering her face from the sun. The old man just stood there, vacant. We need to get them back to town, Tate said. Mrs. Morrison can testify, tell the whole territory what Jack's been doing. But Cole was looking at the horizon, at dust rising in the distance. Riders coming fast, maybe a half dozen of them. We've got company, he said. Tate saw it too, cursed. That gunshot. Should have known it would draw attention. Can we outrun them with these 2? Tate looked at Mrs. Morrison, who could barely stand, and the old man who seemed unaware of danger. Not a chance. Then we make a stand. They moved quickly, getting the prisoners back into the relative safety of the cellar and positioning themselves behind cover near the barn. Cole had retrieved his gun belt from his hotel room that morning
and now the matched Colts felt right on his hips again. Familiar weight, deadly comfort. The riders came into view, spreading out as they approached. 6 men, all armed, moving with the coordination of people who'd ridden together before. Cole recognized one of them from last night, the man he'd let run, the one who'd gotten away. They pulled up just outside rifle range, horses dancing. "Sheriff Tate," one of them called out. "You're trespassing on private property." "This is the Brennan place," Tate shouted back. "Belongs to Mrs. Brennan in Denver, last I checked." "Mrs. Brennan sold it to Mr. Voss 6 months ago. So like I said, you're trespassing." "Funny, there's no record of that sale at the county office." A different rider laughed. "Paperwork takes time, Sheriff. You know that." "What I know is you've been keeping prisoners in that cellar. Kidnapping, false imprisonment, maybe worse. You boys want to ride away now, or you want to add resisting arrest to the charges?" Silence. The riders conferred among themselves, probably calculating odds and consequences. 6 against 2. But the 2 included a sheriff and a known gunfighter. And if they killed a lawman, even Jack Voss's money and influence might not protect them. "We're just following orders," the first rider said. "Mr. Voss told us to keep an eye on this property, make sure nobody disturbed it." "By locking people in a cellar? We don't know nothing about that. We just ride the property line, check on things. If there's prisoners down there, that's news to us." It was a lie and everyone knew it, but it was the kind of lie that might hold up in court if delivered by 6 men swearing the same story. "Here's what's going to happen," Tate said. "You're going to ride back to town ahead of us. You're going to report to my office tomorrow morning for questioning. You try to run, I'll hunt you down. You try to interfere with us leaving here. I'll consider it an act of violence against a peace officer and respond accordingly." The riders didn't move. Cole could see them thinking, weighing options. They'd been sent here to clean up a mess, to make sure whatever was in that cellar never made it to town. 6 against 2 were good odds, even with a sheriff involved. Cole stepped out from behind cover, hands hanging loose near his guns. "You boys know who I am?" His voice carried across the distance, calm and cold. One of the riders spat. "You're Mercer, the killer." "That's right, and every man here has to ask himself, if shooting starts, am I fast enough to avoid being one of the bodies when it's done?" Cole let that sink in. "Sheriff Tate's got the law on his side. I've got no such restrictions. You draw on him, you draw on both of us. And I promise you, at least 3 of you won't ride away." The math was brutal, and everyone knew it. 3 dead, maybe more, for the privilege of following orders. 3 men who wouldn't collect their wages, wouldn't see their families, wouldn't spend Jack Voss's money. The riders broke. Not all at once, but in pieces. One man backing his horse away, then another, until all 6 were withdrawing. The first rider pointed at Tate. "This isn't over, Sheriff." "No," Tate agreed. "It's not. See you tomorrow morning." They rode away, dust trailing behind them. Cole watched until they disappeared beyond the ridge, then finally let himself breathe. "Think they'll actually show up tomorrow?" he asked. "Not a chance. They'll run straight to Jack, tell him what happened. By tomorrow he'll have lawyers and witnesses and a story that makes all this look like a misunderstanding." Tate moved to help Mrs. Morrison out of the cellar again. "But at least we've got her. One witness who can testify to what Jack's been doing." They made it back to Redemption Flats by late afternoon, Mrs. Morrison riding behind Tate, the old man behind Cole. The whole town came out to watch as they rode down the main street to the doctor's office. Cole saw faces registering shock, confusion, anger. News of what they'd found would spread fast. Clara Voss stood outside the general store, and when she saw Mrs. Morrison's condition, something in her face cracked. She turned away quickly, hand over her mouth, but not before Cole saw the horror and shame in her eyes. The doctor took charge of both prisoners, tisking over their condition and shouting for hot water and clean blankets. Tate started writing up reports, documenting everything. Cole stood outside watching the sun descend toward the mountains, feeling the weight of what came next settling on his shoulders. Jack Voss now knew his secret prison had been discovered, knew his operation was exposed, knew the law had evidence that could destroy him, which meant Jack would have to act, and act soon, before more evidence emerged or more witnesses found their courage. The war Wade had started was about to turn bloody, and Cole Mercer, who'd ridden west hoping to bury his violent past, was about to find himself in the middle of it, whether he wanted to be or not. Jack Voss came to town the next morning with an army at his back. Cole watched from the hotel window as a dozen riders moved down the main street in tight formation, their horses fresh and their weapons visible. At their center rode a man in his early 30s, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in clothes that cost more than most men in the territory made in a year. His face carried the kind of confidence that came from never being told no, from believing the world bent to his will simply because it always had. This was the man Wade had died trying to stop. Cole strapped on his gun belt and went downstairs. The street had cleared as if by magic, townspeople vanishing into shops and homes, leaving only Sheriff Tate standing outside his office with Deputy Coleman beside him. Coleman's side was bandaged heavy under his shirt, but he'd insisted on being there, rifle in hand despite the pain it clearly caused him to stand upright. Jack Voss dismounted with easy grace and walked toward Tate with the swagger of a man who owned everything he surveyed. His riders stayed mounted, hands resting casual on their weapons, eyes scanning the windows and rooftops. "Sheriff," Jack said, his voice carrying that peculiar mix of courtesy and contempt that powerful men used when addressing those they considered beneath them. "I understand you had quite an adventure yesterday." "Not an adventure, Mr. Voss, an investigation." "One that uncovered kidnapping and false imprisonment on property you apparently own." "Property I recently acquired, yes, though I had no idea anyone was using the old root cellar for anything improper." Jack's smile didn't reach his eyes. "When I heard about Mrs. Morrison's unfortunate situation, I was horrified. Simply horrified. I've already sent word to my foreman to investigate which of my employees might have acted so barbarously without my knowledge or consent." It was smoothly done, Cole had to admit. Jack was already building his defense, the innocent ranch owner whose employees had overstepped their authority, acting on their own initiative in their misguided efforts to protect his interests. "That's convenient," Tate said. "Your men kidnap people, lock them in your cellar on your property, and you knew nothing about it." "The Brennan place is one of several properties I've acquired recently. I can't personally supervise every inch of my holdings, Sheriff. That's what foremen and ranch hands are for. If they abuse their positions, they'll be dealt with accordingly." "Starting with Frank Carson and Pete Hollis?" Jack's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "My lawyer secured their release this morning. Insufficient evidence to hold them. As I understand it, the charges were based solely on the word of a known criminal, and a deputy who was where he had no business being." "That deputy nearly died," Coleman said, voice tight with pain and anger, "which is regrettable. Had you identified yourselves clearly as law enforcement instead of skulking around in the dark like thieves, perhaps my men wouldn't have felt threatened and responded accordingly." Jack turned his attention to Cole for the first time, looking him up and down like he was evaluating livestock. "You must be Mercer, Wade Holloway's friend." "I am." "Shame about Wade. He was a decent man, if a bit naive about how things work out here." Jack's voice carried manufactured sympathy. "I understand you arrived just after his death. Tragic timing." "Or convenient timing," Cole said quietly. "Depending on your perspective." The street went very still. Jack's riders shifted in their saddles, hands tightening on weapons. But Jack himself just smiled, cold and calculating. "I'm not sure I follow your meaning, Mr. Mercer." "Wade was investigating you, building a case about your rustling operation, your intimidation tactics, your methods of acquiring land through force and fear. Then suddenly he's dead, shot in the back, and all that evidence becomes questionable because the man who gathered it can't testify." Cole took a step forward. "Convenient. Are you accusing me of murder?" "I'm observing facts." Jack's smile widened, but there was nothing friendly in it now. "Be careful with your observations, Mr. Mercer. This territory doesn't take kindly to drifters making wild accusations about established citizens. Men have been hanged for less." "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning. For your own protection." Jack glanced at Tate. "Sheriff, I came here in good faith to address these unfortunate misunderstandings. I've offered my full cooperation in investigating what happened at the Brennan place. If there are charges to be filed against specific employees, I'll ensure they face justice. But I won't stand here and be slandered by some gunfighter who rode into town looking for trouble." "Nobody's slandering you, Mr. Voss," Tate said carefully. "We're conducting an investigation. That means asking hard questions and following evidence wherever it leads." Then follow it legally, not through illegal raids on private property or violent confrontations based on the word of criminals. Jack mounted his horse in one smooth motion, looking down at them from the saddle. I have business to attend to. If you need anything further from me, Sheriff, I suggest you come through proper channels, with warrants and formal charges. Otherwise, stay off my land. He wheeled his horse around and his riders fell in behind him, moving back up the street in the same tight formation they'd arrived in. Cole watched them go, reading the message in every line of their bodies. We're stronger, we're organized, and we're not afraid of you. Well, Coleman said when they were gone, that went about as expected. He's setting the narrative, Tate said grimly. By tomorrow, half the territory will believe his men acted without his knowledge. That Mrs. Morrison's imprisonment was a mistake made by overzealous employees, that we're the ones persecuting an innocent businessman. Will it work? Cole asked. Depends on Mrs. Morrison. If she can testify clearly about what happened, identify the men who took her, connect it directly to Jack's orders, maybe we have a chance. But she's in bad shape, half-starved and traumatized. Making her stand up in court against Jack Voss's lawyers. Tate shook his head. It won't be pretty. Cole looked up the street where Jack's riders had disappeared. He's going to come for her. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but he can't afford to let her testify. I've got her under protection at the doctor's office. Nobody gets in without going through me. That won't be enough. Not against what Jack can bring to bear. Then what do you suggest? Cole thought about it, weighing options and outcomes. We need more. More evidence, more witnesses, something so solid that Jack can't talk his way around it or bury it with lawyers and money. Wade spent months trying to build that case, ended up with a journal full of suspicions and not enough proof to hang a dog. Wade was trying to do it the right way, following rules, documenting everything, building a legal case. Cole's hand rested on his gun, old instincts rising. Maybe it's time to stop playing by rules Jack doesn't follow. Tate's eyes narrowed. What are you planning, Mercer? I'm planning to finish what Wade started. My way. Before Tate could respond, a woman's voice cut through the tension. Mr. Mercer, I need to speak with you, privately. Clara Voss stood at the edge of the boardwalk, dressed in riding clothes, her face pale but determined. She wouldn't meet Tate's eyes, focusing entirely on Cole. Miss Voss, Tate said carefully, if you have information about your brother's activities, I said privately, Sheriff. Her voice was firm despite the tremor underneath. Please. Cole looked at Tate, who nodded reluctantly. Clara led him down the street to a small park near the edge of town where a few scraggly trees provided shade and the illusion of privacy. She stood with her arms wrapped around herself, staring at the mountains like they might offer escape. I saw Mrs. Morrison, Clara said finally. Saw what my brother did to her. What your brother's men did, Cole corrected. According to Jack, anyway. Don't. The word came out sharp. Don't insult me by pretending we both don't know the truth. Jack ordered it. Jack knew. Just like he knew about Wade, about the rustling, about all of it. She turned to face him, and Cole saw tears tracking down her cheeks. I've known for months what my brother was becoming. I just couldn't bring myself to believe it was this bad. Wade thought you could help him. Thought you had information that could bring Jack down. Wade was wrong. I have information, yes. I know things. But I can't testify, Mr. Mercer. I can't stand up in court and destroy my own family. Even if your family is destroying innocent people? You don't understand what you're asking. Jack is all I have left. Our parents are dead. Our younger brother died in a riding accident 5 years ago. It's just Jack and Nora and me. If I betray him, her voice broke. I'll lose everything. My home, my name, whatever future I might have. Women don't have many choices in this world, Mr. Mercer. Without family, I'm nothing. Cole studied her, seeing the conflict tearing her apart. She wanted to do the right thing, wanted to honor Wade's memory, but the cost was more than she could bear to pay. Wade loved you, Cole said quietly. Clara flinched like he'd struck her. I know. Did you love him? That's not a fair question. Fair or not, it's the question that matters. Because if you loved him, really loved him, then you know what he'd want you to do. Wade died trying to stop your brother. Died believing that truth and justice mattered more than fear and power. Are you going to let that mean nothing? What I do won't bring Wade back. No, but it might save the next man Jack decides to kill, the next family he destroys, the next person he locks in a cellar and forgets about. Cole moved closer, urgent. Clara, you have the power to end this. Whatever information you have, whatever you know about Jack's operation, it could be the difference between justice and more bloodshed. She was silent for a long moment, wrestling with herself. Then she reached into her riding jacket and pulled out a small leather-bound book. This is my father's old ledger, from when he first started the ranch. Jack doesn't know I have it. She held it out, hands shaking. Cross-reference the dates and transactions in here with the current ranch records. You'll find discrepancies. Cattle purchases that never happened. Bills of sale for livestock that don't exist. My father was meticulous about record-keeping. Jack is not. He's been using the ranch's legitimate business to hide his rustling operation, mixing stolen cattle with legally purchased ones, laundering everything through paperwork. Cole took the ledger, feeling its weight. This could work. This could actually prove what Jack's been doing. It could also get me killed. If Jack finds out I gave you this... She stopped, unable to finish. Then we make sure he doesn't find out. You never spoke to me, never gave me anything. As far as anyone knows, I stole this during a raid on the ranch. Clara looked at him, desperate hope warring with fear. Will it be enough? Will this actually stop him? Combined with Mrs. Morrison's testimony and the evidence we found at the Brennan place, it should be. But Clara, you need to prepare yourself. Once this goes to trial, once the evidence is public, Jack will know where it came from. He'll figure out you're the only one who could have accessed your father's old records. I know. She wrapped her arms around herself again, smaller than ever. Wade used to tell me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's right even when you're terrified. A broken laugh. I'm terrified, Mr. Mercer, more than I've ever been in my life, but I can't live with myself if I do nothing. Can't look in the mirror knowing I could have stopped this and chose safety instead. Wade would be proud of you. Wade's dead because of my cowardice. If I'd spoken up months ago, testified when he first asked me to, maybe he'd still be alive. Cole couldn't argue with that, so he didn't try. They stood there in the sparse shade while the morning sun climbed higher, two people carrying the weight of choices that would change everything. There's something else you should know, Clara said. Nora's planning something. I don't know what, but she's been meeting with some of the small ranchers, the ones Jack's been squeezing hardest. She thinks I don't notice, but I do. She's trying to organize them, build some kind of resistance. Against Jack? Against the whole system that lets men like Jack do what they want without consequences. Nora's always been the brave one, the reckless one. She doesn't understand caution or compromise. Clara's voice held both admiration and fear. She's going to get herself killed if someone doesn't stop her. Or she might succeed where Wade failed. Is that what you call success? Wade's in a grave, Mr. Mercer. 2 of Jack's men are dead from your raid. Mrs. Morrison's mind is half broken from months in darkness. If this is success, I'd hate to see failure. She had a point. Every step forward seemed to cost blood and suffering, victory, measured in survival rather than triumph. What would you have me do? Cole asked. Walk away. Let Jack win? I don't know. I honestly don't know anymore what the right thing is. I just know I'm tired of being afraid, tired of pretending I don't see what's happening, tired of living in a world where men like my brother hold all the power and everyone else just suffers quietly. She left him there with the ledger and the weight of what came next. Cole watched her ride away, sitting her horse with the same rigid control she brought to everything, like if she relaxed for even a moment, she might completely fall apart. He spent the afternoon studying the ledger, cross-referencing entries with Wade's journal and the documents they'd collected. The pattern was there, clear as daylight, once you knew what to look for. Jack Voss had been running stolen cattle through his legitimate ranch operation for at least 3 years, maybe longer. The scale was impressive. Hundreds of head of cattle, tens of thousands of dollars in theft, all hidden in plain sight through careful manipulation of records. It was exactly the kind of evidence that could break Jack's empire apart. The question was whether they'd live long enough to present it in court. As evening approached, Cole found himself at Wade's grave again. The cross stood straight against the sunset, Wade's name carved deep enough to last a few more years before weather erased it completely. Found your evidence, Cole said to the dead earth. Clara came through just like you hoped she would. Journal, ledger, witness testimony. We've got everything we need to bring Jack down. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying no answers. But you knew the hard part wasn't finding evidence, didn't you? The hard part is surviving long enough to use it. Jack's not going to just let us walk this into a courtroom. He's going to fight, and people are going to die. Cole's hand drifted to his gun. I swore I was done with killing. Came here hoping to build something peaceful with you. Instead, I'm right back where I've always been. Violence and blood, and the gun being the only answer that works. He stood there as the light failed, talking to a dead man who couldn't answer, trying to make peace with choices that had already been made the moment he rode into Redemption Flats. That night, they came for Mrs. Morrison. Cole was sleeping light when the first gunshot cracked through the darkness. He was out of bed and moving before the echo faded, gun in hand, pulling on pants and boots while his mind calculated trajectories and threats. The shots came from the direction of the doctor's office. The street was chaos when Cole reached it. The doctor's building was on fire, flames licking up the front wall where someone had thrown burning oil. Men with torches and guns surrounded the structure, silhouettes against the orange glow. Sheriff Tate was already there, gun drawn, shouting orders that nobody followed. Deputy Coleman fired from cover near the general store, his rifle cracking sharp against the roar of flames and shouting. The raiders fired back, not aiming to kill, but to keep everyone pinned while they completed whatever they'd come to do. Cole moved through the chaos like a ghost, using smoke and shadows for cover. He saw a raider smash through the doctor's back door and followed. Inside, smoke choked the narrow hallway. The doctor lay unconscious near the entrance, blood on his temple where he'd been struck. Upstairs, Cole heard screaming. Mrs. Morrison, terrified and fighting. He took the stairs 3 at a time. 2 men had her, dragging her toward a window they'd broken open. She fought with desperate strength, but she was weak from captivity, and they were trained for violence. Let her go, Cole said. Both men spun, reaching for weapons. Cole shot the first one through the chest before his gun cleared leather. The second managed to draw and fire, the bullet gouging splinters from the doorframe near Cole's head. Cole's return shot took him in the throat, and he went down gurgling. Mrs. Morrison collapsed, sobbing. Cole grabbed her, hauled her to her feet. We need to move. Building's on fire. They made it downstairs and out the back as the front wall collapsed in a shower of sparks and burning timber. Tate was there helping Cole get Mrs. Morrison to safety. The raiders were pulling back now. Their mission failed, melting into the darkness before they could be identified or captured. The doctor's office burned to the ground while the whole town watched, and there wasn't enough water or organization to stop it. By dawn, only smoldering ruins remained. They'll try again, Tate said, standing in the ashes. Jack can't let Mrs. Morrison testify. He'll keep sending men until they succeed or until we're all dead. Then we don't wait for him to come to us, Cole said. We take the fight to him. That's not how the law works. The law nearly got Mrs. Morrison killed last night, got the doctor's office burned down. How many more people have to suffer before you admit the law isn't enough? Cole turned to face Tate fully. Jack Voss owns this territory because good men keep trying to fight him with rules he doesn't follow. Wade tried it your way and died for it. You keep trying it, and more people will die. And what's your way, Mercer? Ride out to the Voss ranch and start shooting? That makes you no better than Jack. It makes me the man who ends this. Cole's voice was cold now, the old killer rising to the surface. Wade's evidence gives you what you need for the legal side. But someone has to make sure Jack doesn't burn it all down before it reaches a courtroom. Someone has to hit back hard enough that Jack understands he's not untouchable anymore. That someone being you. That someone being me. Tate was silent for a long moment, smoke still drifting around them. I can't sanction this. Can't give you official permission to raid the Voss ranch or confront Jack directly. I'm not asking for permission. I know. But Mercer, listen to me. You go out there alone and you won't come back. Jack has 30 men on that ranch, maybe more. You're fast and you're deadly, but you're not a miracle worker. I don't plan to go alone. As if summoned by the words, Nora Voss emerged from the crowd that had gathered to watch the fire. She walked straight to Cole, eyes blazing. I heard what you said about taking the fight to Jack. She looked at the ruins of the doctor's office. I'm coming with you. Nora, Tate started. Don't, Sheriff. I've spent too long watching my brother destroy everything decent in this territory. I'm done watching. She turned to Cole. I know the ranch layout, know where Jack keeps his records, Know which men are loyal enough to die for him and which ones are just collecting wages. You need that information if you want to survive this. Your brother will kill you if he catches you helping me. Probably, but at least I'll die doing something that matters. Nora's smile was fierce and reckless. Besides, you're not the only one who loved Wade Holloway. He was kind to me when nobody else was, treated me like I had a brain instead of just being Jack's little sister. I owe him this. Cole looked at this wild young woman who was offering to betray her own blood for the sake of justice, and he saw in her the kind of courage Wade had believed in, the courage to stand up even when standing meant risking everything. If you come with me, there's no turning back, Cole said. Your family will disown you, the territory will call you a traitor, and you'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Better that than spending it looking in a mirror and hating what I see. Tate threw up his hands. You're both crazy. This is suicide. Maybe, Cole agreed, but it's the only play we have left. Jack proved tonight he's willing to burn down the whole town if that's what it takes to protect himself. We hit him first, hit him hard, and force him into a position where he has to answer for what he's done. And if you die trying, then at least the fight will have been fought. At least people will know Jack Voss isn't invincible. Cole checked his guns, the ritual familiar and comforting. Wade believed truth could win. I hope he was right, but sometimes truth needs a little help from men willing to bleed for it. The sun was rising now, painting the smoke-stained sky in shades of red and gold. Cole Mercer stood in the ruins of the doctor's office and felt the last pieces of his peaceful future crumble to ash. He'd come to Redemption Flats hoping to bury his violent past, but the past had followed him here the way it always did. The only question left was whether he'd bury it at last, or whether it would finally bury him. Nora Voss stood beside him, small and fierce and ready to sacrifice everything for the chance at justice. Somewhere in town, Clara was waking to the news that her sister had chosen a side, that the family she'd tried so hard to hold together was splitting apart in blood and fire. Mrs. Morrison was being moved to a safe house, guarded by men Tate trusted, preparing to testify if any of them survived long enough to reach a courtroom. And out on his ranch, Jack Voss was hearing that his raid had failed, that the evidence against him was growing, that the gunfighter he'd dismissed was still breathing and still dangerous. The war Wade had started was about to reach its breaking point. One way or another, before another sun set on Redemption Flats, the territory would know whether law and justice could triumph over power and fear, or whether Cole Mercer's guns would have to write the answer in blood. They rode out 2 hours before dawn, 4 riders moving through darkness toward a reckoning that had been building since the day Wade Holloway died. Cole led the way, with Nora beside him and 2 of the small ranchers she'd recruited, Miguel Torres and a weathered man named Sam Bridger, who'd lost half his herd to Jack's rustling operation and wanted blood for it. Sheriff Tate had refused to come, said he couldn't be part of an illegal raid no matter how justified. But he'd looked the other way when they left town, and Cole had seen him slip extra ammunition into Coleman's saddlebag. The young deputy rode with them despite his wound, determined to see this through for Wade's sake. The 5 of them were going up against 30 men on Jack Voss's home ground, and Cole knew the odds were brutal. But surprise and motivation could balance a lot of numerical disadvantage, especially when the men you were fighting thought themselves invincible. Nora guided them through back trails she'd learned as a girl, paths that wound through rough country where Jack's sentries wouldn't be watching. They moved in silence, speaking only when necessary, each of them alone with thoughts of what morning might bring. As they paused to rest the horses in a canyon still deep with shadow, Miguel Torres rode up beside Cole. "You think we'll make it out of this alive?" His voice was quiet, accented with the Spanish of his childhood. "Honestly, probably not all of us." Miguel nodded, accepting that. "My father used to say that some things are worth dying for. I never understood that until Jack Voss took everything my family built and left us with nothing but fear." He checked his rifle, fingers moving with the ease of long practice. "Today, maybe I make him understand what it costs to steal from people who have nothing left to lose. Just stay smart. Stay alive if you can. The dead don't get to see justice done. Maybe. But sometimes the dead inspire the living to finish what they started." They rode on. The Voss Ranch sprawled across a valley where 3 creeks converged, giving it water rights that made it the most valuable spread in the territory. The main house sat on a rise overlooking the ranch buildings: bunkhouse, barns, corrals, cookhouse. Even in darkness, Cole could see it was an impressive operation, the kind of empire that took decades to build and could be destroyed in an afternoon if you knew where to hit it. Nora led them to a vantage point where they could observe without being seen. Lamplight showed in the bunkhouse windows, men stirring early to begin the day's work. Smoke rose from the cookhouse chimney. The main house was dark except for a single light burning in what Nora identified as Jack's office.
"He's been sleeping there lately," she whispered. "Ever since Wade died. Like he's waiting for something." "He's waiting for us," Cole said. "Or someone like us. He knows the evidence is building, knows people are turning against him. A man like that doesn't sleep easy." "Good. I hope fear eats him alive before we ever get there." Coleman studied the layout through field glasses. "That bunkhouse holds most of his crew. If we can lock them in, set a fire or something, we cut his numbers in half before the shooting even starts. And burn alive men who might just be hired hands collecting wages?" Sam Bridger shook his head. "That's Jack's way of doing things, not ours." "Then what do you suggest? We ride in polite and ask Jack to surrender?" "We hit the barn first," Cole said, thinking it through. "Scatter the horses, cut them off from easy pursuit. Then we hit the ranch office where Jack keeps his records." "Nora, you said you knew where everything was kept." "Second floor of the main house, in his office. Father's old safe is there. That's where Jack stores the bills of sale, brand records, all the paperwork for the legitimate operation. If he's mixing stolen cattle through the books like Clara thinks, the evidence will be there." "How do we get in?" Nora's smile was grim. "I still have a key. Jack never bothered to change the locks. Probably never imagined his own sister would turn against him." The Cole divided them into two groups. He and Nora would go for the house and the records. Miguel, Sam, and Coleman would create chaos at the barn and bunkhouse, make enough noise to draw attention away from the main house. If things went to hell, they'd rendezvous at a predetermined spot 3 miles north and run for it. "One more thing," Cole said, looking at each of them in turn. "We're here for evidence, not revenge. We fight if we have to, kill if we must, but the goal is getting those records and getting out alive. Anyone who wants to settle personal scores with Jack Voss can do it after he's standing trial." Sam Bridger spat. "And if he never makes it to trial? If his lawyers get him off or his money buys him freedom? Then we'll deal with that when it comes. But right now, we do this clean. We do it in a way that honors what Wade died for. Justice through law, not justice through the gun." They waited until the sky began to lighten in the east, that thin gray time before dawn when men were deepest in sleep and their awareness dulled by the approaching promise of daylight. Then they moved. Miguel, Sam, and Coleman hit the barn like thunder, smashing open the corral gates and firing shots into the air that sent horses scattering in every direction. Men poured out of the bunkhouse, half-dressed and confused, shouting questions that got lost in the chaos. Someone rang the ranch bell, the alarm clanging across the valley. Cole and Nora used the distraction to slip into the main house through a side entrance. Inside, the house was silent and dark, furnished with the kind of heavy wood and leather that spoke of old money and territorial power. Nora led him through hallways she knew by heart, moving quick and sure toward the stairs. They were halfway up when a door opened above them and Clara stepped out, dressed in a nightgown with a shawl pulled around her shoulders. She saw Nora and her face went white. "What are you doing here?" Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "Nora, are you insane?" "Probably." Nora kept moving, pushing past her sister. "Go back to your room, Clara. Pretend you didn't see anything." "I can't. You can't." Clara grabbed Nora's arm. "If Jack finds you here helping them, he'll kill you. You're his sister, but that won't matter. Not after you've betrayed him like this." "I know what I'm doing." "Do you? Do you really?" Clara's eyes found Cole. "And you? You should have stayed away. Should have let Wade's death mean something instead of throwing away more lives trying to avenge him." "This isn't about vengeance," Cole said quietly. "It's about ending what Wade started. Your sister's helping because she's brave enough to do what you couldn't." The words hit Clara like a slap. She released Nora's arm, stepping back against the wall. "You don't know what you're asking. Don't know what it costs." "I know exactly what it costs. Wade paid it. Your sister's willing to pay it. The question is whether you're going to help us or help Jack."
Outside, the shooting was getting heavier. Men were organizing now, forming up to defend the ranch. They didn't have much time. Clara stood there torn between everything she'd been raised to believe: family loyalty, self-preservation, the safety of silence, and the truth she could no longer deny. Then she moved, suddenly decisive. Jack's office. This way. She pushed past them both, leading them down the hall. The safe combination is Father's birthday: 8/17/51. Jack never changed it because he can't remember numbers worth a damn. The office was exactly as Nora had described, dominated by a massive desk and the iron safe standing against the far wall. Clara knelt before it with shaking hands, working the combination. The lock clicked open. Inside, carefully organized ledgers and files documented years of ranch operations. Cole grabbed everything, stuffing papers into a canvas sack they'd brought for exactly this purpose. Birth records for cattle, bills of sale, brand registrations, shipping manifests, all of it.
There's more, Clara said, reaching deep into the safe. She pulled out a smaller ledger, leather-bound and worn. This is Jack's private book, the real accounting. He keeps it separate from the official records so no one can cross-reference and spot the discrepancies. Cole took it, flipped it open.
Even a quick glance showed what they needed: columns of numbers documenting cattle that existed on paper but not in reality, sales recorded for livestock that had been stolen rather than purchased, a detailed map of exactly how Jack had built his empire on theft and fraud. "This is it," Cole breathed. "This is everything." A gunshot shattered the window, glass exploding inward. Cole shoved both women down as more shots followed, someone firing from the yard below. He returned fire blind, just enough to make them duck for cover. "We need to go," Nora said. "Now!" They ran for the stairs but found their path blocked. Jack Voss stood in the hallway with 3 of his men, all armed, all pointing weapons at the figures descending toward them. "Well," Jack said, his voice cold and controlled despite the chaos outside. "This is disappointing. I expected an attack, expected men to come after what's mine, but I never imagined my own sisters would be part of it." "Jack," Clara started. "Shut up." He didn't even look at her, his attention fixed on Cole. "Mercer, the famous gunfighter, Wade's avenging angel. You should have taken my advice and left when you had the chance." "Probably," Cole agreed. His hand hovered near his gun, calculating angles and odds. 3 men plus Jack, all with weapons drawn and ready. He might drop 2 before they killed him, maybe 3 if he was lucky. But Nora and Clara would die in the crossfire. "Put the sack down," Jack ordered. "Whatever you took from my office, it goes back." "Can't do that." "Then you'll die here. So will my treacherous sisters." Jack's voice carried genuine pain now beneath the anger. "Did you really think I wouldn't post guards? Wouldn't be ready for this exact scenario? I've been 3 steps ahead of you since you rode into Redemption Flats, Mercer. Wade thought he was building a case against me. I knew everything he was doing, every person he talked to, every piece of evidence he gathered. I let him think he was succeeding right up until the moment I had him killed." "You're admitting to murder," Cole said. "To you? To my sisters who've already betrayed me? What does it matter?" Jack raised his gun, pointing it at Clara. "You. You gave him Father's ledger, didn't you? I saw it was missing this morning, knew it had to be you." "Sweet, loyal Clara, who I trusted to manage the household accounts." "I gave it to him because what you're doing is wrong," Clara said, voice shaking but holding. "Father built this ranch through honest work and fair dealing. You've turned it into something vile." "Father was weak. He could have owned this entire territory, but he was too afraid of offending people, too concerned with being liked." "I'm not weak, Clara. I take what I want and I hold it." Jack's finger tightened on the trigger, starting with making sure my secrets stay buried. The shot that rang out didn't come from Jack's gun. It came from behind Cole, from the doorway they'd just exited. Nora had drawn a small pistol from somewhere and fired, the bullet catching one of Jack's men in the shoulder and spinning him around. Everything exploded into violence. Cole drew and fired in the same motion, his first shot taking Jack in the gun hand and sending his weapon clattering. His second dropped another of Jack's men. The third hired gun fired wild, his bullet gouging plaster from the wall as Cole's return shot punched through his chest. Jack dove for his fallen gun with his left hand, blood streaming from his ruined right. Cole could have killed him, should have killed him. But Wade's voice echoed in his memory, arguing for law and justice over quick frontier violence. "Don't," Cole said, gun trained on Jack's head. "It's over." "It's never over." Jack's smile was bloody and hateful.
You think you've won? You think taking some ledgers and shooting a few of my men changes anything? I own the judges, the politicians, the merchants. Every person of influence in this territory is in my pocket. They'll never convict me. Maybe, but they'll have to try you first. And once this evidence is public, once people see what you've really been doing, your empire starts crumbling whether you hang or not. Outside, the shooting had stopped.
Miguel appeared at the bottom of the stairs, rifle in hand. "We got the horses scattered and the bunkhouse boys surrendering," he called up. "Coleman's holding them at gunpoint in the yard. We should go before more trouble arrives." Cole backed toward the stairs, keeping his gun on Jack. Clara and Nora moved with him, Clara supporting her sister who'd gone pale and shaky now that the immediate danger had passed. "This isn't over, Mercer," Jack said, struggling to his feet while clutching his shattered hand. "I'll come for you, for all of you. I'll hunt you down and make you pay for this. You're welcome to try, but right now you better worry about yourself. Sheriff Tate's going to want words about murder, kidnapping, rustling, and about a dozen other charges once he sees what's in these ledgers." They made it outside to find the ranch yard transformed into something from a battlefield. Scattered horses, broken fences, 20 men sitting on the ground with their hands visible, while Coleman and Sam stood guard. The main barn had caught fire somehow, flames licking up into the dawn sky. "Accident," Sam said, not meeting Cole's eyes. "Lantern got knocked over in the confusion." Whether accident or deliberate, it didn't matter. The barn was Jack's livelihood, his operations center. Watching it burn felt like watching the old order collapse into ash. They loaded Jack onto a horse, his wounded hand wrapped in cloth torn from someone's shirt. He rode in silence, face carved from stone, eyes promising future violence. His men followed, disarmed and defeated, the fight gone out of them now that their boss was captured and bleeding. The ride back to Redemption Flats took 3 hours. By the time they reached town, word had already spread somehow. Maybe from one of Jack's men who'd escaped during the raid, maybe just through that mysterious way news traveled in frontier country. The whole population lined the street, silent and watching as Cole's group rode in with their prisoners. Sheriff Tate waited outside his office, face unreadable. When they dismounted, he looked at the canvas sack of ledgers, at Jack's bloody hand, at Clara and Nora standing apart from their brother. "I assume you have a good explanation for all this," Tate said. Cole handed him the sack. "Everything you need to prosecute Jack Voss. His private ledgers, ranch records, documentation of every illegal transaction going back 5 years, plus Jack's own confession to ordering Wade's murder. I've got 3 witnesses who heard it." Tate opened the sack, pulled out Jack's private ledger, and flipped through it. His expression shifted as he read, understanding dawning. "This is—" He stopped it, starting over. "This is comprehensive. This is the kind of evidence that could actually stick." "That's what Wade died for," Cole said quietly. "That's what all this bloodshed bought." Tate looked at Jack, who stood straight despite his wound, defiant even in defeat. "Jack Voss, you're under arrest for murder, conspiracy to commit murder, cattle rustling, kidnapping, false imprisonment, and about 15 other charges I'll think up while you're sitting in my jail. You have the right to legal representation, which I'm sure you'll afford yourself plenty of." "You're making a mistake, Sheriff," Jack said. "A mistake you'll regret for the rest of your short life." "The only mistake I made was waiting this long to arrest you. Should have listened to Wade months ago." Tate gestured to Coleman. "Lock him up. Separate Cell from his men, and get the doctor to look at that hand before he bleeds out. I want him healthy enough to stand trial." As they led Jack away, Clara stepped forward. "Sheriff, I need to make a statement about what I know regarding my brother's operations, about the information I provided to Mr. Mercer, about everything." Her voice was steady now, the fear burned away by action. "I'll testify. In court. In front of the whole territory. I'll tell the truth about what Jack's been doing." Tate's eyes widened. "Miss Voss, you understand what that means? Testifying against your own brother, destroying your family name. My family name is already destroyed. Jack destroyed it when he chose power over decency. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth." She looked at Cole. "Wade died believing truth mattered more than fear. I'm going to prove he was right.
Nora put her arm around her sister, and together they walked into the sheriff's office to give their statements.
Cole watched them go. These two women who'd found courage in the shadow of their brother's evil and felt something loosen in his chest that had been tight since Wade's death. Miguel Torres approached, hat in hand. "Mr. Mercer, I wanted to thank you for leading us, for making this happen. My family can sleep safe now, knowing Jack won't be stealing from us anymore." "Thank Wade. He did the hard work. I just finished it." Wade was a good man. But good men don't always win unless they have hard men willing to fight for them. Miguel offered his hand. "You ever need anything, you send word. Me and mine, we won't forget what you did here." Sam Bridger echoed the sentiment, as did half a dozen other small ranchers who'd gathered to watch Jack's arrest. They pressed around Cole, offering thanks and promises of support, their faces showing relief and hope, and the beginning of something that might become justice. But Cole felt hollow inside, watching it all happen. They'd won. Wade's evidence combined with the raid had broken Jack's empire, exposed his crimes, given the territory a chance to heal. But the victory tasted like ash and gunpowder, purchased with blood and fear and the knowledge that Cole Mercer had once again become exactly what he'd spent years trying to escape. He found himself in the saloon as afternoon faded toward evening, nursing whiskey that did nothing to quiet the thoughts churning in his head. The bartender kept his glass full and his distance, recognizing a man who wanted to be alone with his ghosts. "Mind if I join you?" Cole looked up to find Deputy Coleman sliding onto the stool beside him, moving careful around his wounded side. "Free country," Cole said. "That it is. Freer today than it was yesterday. Thanks to you." Coleman ordered his own whiskey, drank it in one swallow. "You saved my life twice now. Once out on the range, once this morning when you could have let Jack's men shoot us all and made your escape. Wasn't going to leave you behind." Most men would have. Most men look out for themselves first. Coleman studied his empty glass. "Wade used to talk about you sometimes. Said you were the best man he'd ever known, but also the saddest. Said you carried too much weight, too much guilt over things you couldn't change." Wade talked too much. Maybe. Or maybe he just saw clearly. Coleman gestured for another drink. "What will you do now? Jack's arrested, the evidence is secure, the trial will happen whether you're here to see it or not. You could ride out tomorrow, go find that peaceful life you came here looking for." Cole had been thinking the same thing. His business in Redemption Flats was finished. Wade was avenged, justice was in motion, and Cole's guns had served their purpose one final time. He could leave, disappear into the territories, maybe find a place where nobody knew his name or his past. But something held him here. Some unfinished thread that kept him from mounting up and riding away. "I'll stay for the trial," he heard himself say. "Wade deserves someone there to see his work completed." That could be months. Jack's lawyers will file motions, demand delays, challenge every piece of evidence. Could take until next year before it reaches a courtroom. "Then I'll stay until next year." Coleman looked at him sideways. "Or you could stay because this town needs men like you. Men who know how to stand up when standing is hard. We could use a real deputy, someone with experience and backbone. I'm not a lawman. You're whatever you choose to be, Mercer. Wade chose to be something better than what the war made him. You could make that same choice." Before Cole could answer, the saloon doors swung open and Clara entered. The room went quiet, everyone staring at this respectable woman walking alone into a place respectable women didn't go. She ignored them all, walking straight to where Cole sat. "I need to talk to you," she said. They stepped outside into the evening cool. The street was quieting down, people heading home for supper, the excitement of Jack's arrest fading into the routine rhythms of ordinary life. Clara stood with her arms wrapped around herself, looking smaller and more fragile than she had that morning when she'd been defying her brother with a gun in his own house. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for finishing what Wade started, for giving his death meaning." Wade's death already had meaning. He was fighting for something that mattered. But fighting isn't enough if you don't win. You made sure we won. She looked up at him, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Wade loved you like a brother. Did you know that? He used to say you saved his life in the war more times than he could count. Said you were the bravest man he'd ever known, even if you didn't believe it yourself. Wade saw the best in people, sometimes more than was actually there. Or maybe he just saw clearly what others missed.
Clara reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object, a silver compass, worn smooth with age. This was Wade's. He showed it to me once, said his father gave it to him before the war, said it helped him find his way home when he was lost. She pressed it into Cole's hand. He would want you to have it. Would want you to find your way home too, wherever that might be. Cole looked at the compass, at the arrow spinning slowly until it settled pointing north. Wade had carried this through the war, through years of building his ranch, through his investigation of Jack Voss. And now it sat in Cole's palm, heavy with memory and meaning. "Thank you," he managed. Clara nodded, wiped her eyes quickly. "I should go. Nora's waiting. We're staying at the hotel now. Can't go back to the ranch, not with Jack in jail and everything that's happened. I don't know what we'll do, where we'll go. The Voss name is ruined. Nobody will want anything to do with us. You did the right thing, both of you. That counts for something." "Does it? I'm not sure anymore. All I know is Wade's dead. Jack's going to hang or spend the rest of his life in prison, and my family is destroyed. I keep wondering if there was another way, some path where people didn't have to die, and everything didn't have to end in blood." If there was, Wade would have found it. He tried everything else first. She left him there with the compass and the weight of choices made and consequences lived with. Cole stood in the gathering darkness, thinking about Wade's belief in truth and justice, about Clara's courage and Nora's fierce loyalty, about all the ways people tried to be better than their worst moments. The trial would come eventually. Jack would stand before a judge and jury, and the evidence would be laid out for everyone to see. Maybe he'd be convicted. Maybe his lawyers would find some technicality, or his money would buy his freedom. But either way, the territory knew now what he'd done. The empire built on fear and theft was broken. Wade Holloway could rest easy. And Cole Mercer, the gunfighter who'd ridden west hoping to bury his violent past, had to figure out what came next. Whether he'd drift again, running from his reputation until it caught him in some other town, or whether he'd stay here in Redemption Flats and try to become the man Wade had believed he could be. The compass spun in his hand, the needle searching for true north. Cole didn't have that answer yet, but for the first time in longer than he could remember, he thought maybe he'd stick around long enough to find it. The compass became Cole's constant companion in the weeks that followed, a tangible connection to Wade and to the choice he'd made to stay in Redemption Flats. He'd taken a room above the general store, paying weekly with money from odd jobs around town, fixing fences, breaking horses, helping Miguel Torres rebuild a barn that Jack's men had burned the previous summer. Honest work that left his hands calloused and his back sore, but quieted something restless in his soul. Jack Voss sat in Sheriff Tate's jail while lawyers descended on the territory like carrion birds, filing motions and challenging evidence and doing everything money could buy to delay the inevitable. But the tide had turned against Jack in ways that couldn't be stopped by legal maneuvering. Mrs. Morrison had recovered enough to give a detailed statement about her captivity. Clara and Nora both testified before the territorial judge about what they'd witnessed and what they knew. And Wade's journal, combined with Jack's private ledger, painted a picture of systematic criminality that even the most skilled lawyer couldn't completely obscure. The trial was set for late spring, giving both sides time to prepare their cases. In the meantime, the Voss Ranch sat in a kind of legal limbo. Jack still owned it technically, but with him in jail and his sisters refusing to manage it, the operation ground to a halt. The remaining ranch hands scattered to find work elsewhere. The cattle wandered unfenced across the range, and the burned barn stood as a monument to the empire's collapse. Cole was helping Sam Bridger repair a water trough when Deputy Coleman rode up, moving easier now that his wound had mostly healed. "Mercer?" Coleman called out, dismounting. "Sheriff wants to see you, says it's important." Cole set down his hammer, wiped sweat from his face. "Something wrong?" "Don't know. He wouldn't say. Just told me to fetch you quick." They rode back to town together, the spring sun warm on their shoulders and the grass greening up after the winter snow. Redemption Flats looked different than it had 2 months ago, less tense, like the whole town had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. People nodded to Cole as he passed now, instead of crossing the street to avoid him. A few even called out greetings. Sheriff Tate stood outside his office with a stranger, a man in his 50s wearing a suit too fine for frontier travel and carrying himself with the authority of someone used to being obeyed.
He studied Cole with sharp eyes as they approached. "Mercer," Tate said. "This is Judge William Harrison. He's come from the territorial capital to oversee Jack's trial." Cole shook the offered hand. "Your Honor." "Mr. Mercer, I've been hearing interesting things about you." Harrison's voice carried the educated tones of Eastern schooling. "Sheriff Tate tells me you were instrumental in gathering the evidence against Jack Voss." "Wade Holloway gathered the evidence. I just made sure it saw daylight. Through illegal means, I understand. Raiding private property, engaging in armed conflict, theft of documents." Harrison's expression gave nothing away. "In some jurisdictions, that would make the evidence inadmissible. Fruit of the poison tree, as we say in legal circles." Cole felt something cold settle in his gut. "You saying Jack walks because of how we got the proof?" "I'm saying it's complicated. The defense will certainly argue that point. They'll claim duress, illegal search and seizure, that Mr. Voss's constitutional rights were violated." Harrison paused. "However, the testimony of Clara and Nora Voss changes the calculus considerably. As family members with legitimate access to the ranch and its records, their voluntary cooperation provides legal cover for much of what you obtained. So the evidence stands. Most of it, enough of it." Harrison pulled out a cigar, lit it with deliberate care. "But that's not why I asked to see you. I came because I need to understand what kind of man you are, Mr. Mercer. Your reputation precedes you. Gunfighter, killer, man of violence. Yet here you are helping local ranchers fix water troughs instead of hiring out your gun to the next highest bidder." Cole didn't know how to answer that, so he stayed silent. "Wade Holloway wrote to the territorial governor before he died," Harrison continued. "Sent a letter detailing Jack Voss's crimes and asking for official intervention. In that letter, he mentioned you. Said you were coming to help him, said you were a man who'd made mistakes, but had the courage to fight for what's right when it mattered." The idea of Wade writing about him to the governor, believing in him even before Cole arrived, hit harder than expected. Wade saw the best in people, Cole managed. Perhaps, or perhaps he saw clearly what others missed. Harrison drew on his cigar, exhaled smoke. "The governor is concerned about this case. Jack Voss has powerful friends. Political connections that reach into the territorial legislature. If this trial goes badly, if Jack walks free or receives a light sentence, it sends a message that wealthy men are above the law. That power matters more than justice." "Isn't that already the message?" Cole couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice. "How many men like Jack have bought their way out of consequences?" "Too many, which is why this trial matters so much. We need to prove the system can work, that evidence and truth can triumph over money and influence." Harrison fixed Cole with a penetrating stare. "But trials are unpredictable. Juries can be swayed, witnesses can be intimidated, lawyers can create doubt where none should exist. I need to know, if the legal system fails, if Jack Voss walks out of that courtroom a free man, what will you do?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Harrison was asking if Cole would revert to the old way, if his guns would deliver the justice the courts couldn't. "I came here hoping to bury that part of myself," Cole said slowly. "The part that solves problems with violence. Wade believed there was a better way, believed law and civilization could replace the gun. If I just kill Jack because the trial goes wrong, I'm proving Wade died for nothing." "That's not an answer to my question." Cole thought about it, about Wade's grave and Clara's courage, and the compass in his pocket pointing towards something better than revenge. "If Jack walks free, I'll live with it. I'll trust that justice finds him eventually, that truth has a way of surfacing even when courts fail, because the alternative, becoming the executioner, deciding who lives and dies based on my judgment, that's the world Wade was trying to leave behind. I won't dishonor his memory by dragging us back into it." Harrison studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Good. That's the answer I was hoping for." He turned to Tate. "Sheriff, I'm satisfied. Mr. Mercer can testify at trial without concerns about his motivations or intentions." "Testify?" Cole looked between them. "I'm not sure what help I'd be. I didn't see Jack kill Wade. Can't swear to anything except what happened during the raid." "Your testimony about the raid is crucial," Harrison said. "Jack's confession to ordering Wade's murder, overheard by you and the Voss sisters, that's powerful evidence. Combined with everything else, it builds a comprehensive picture of guilt. Jack's lawyers will tear me apart on the stand. My past, my reputation, my relationship with Wade, they'll use all of it to discredit me. Undoubtedly. Which is why you need to be prepared, need to understand what you're facing. Harrison's expression softened slightly. But ultimately, Mr. Mercer, this isn't about you. It's about Wade, about the Morrisons and the Torres family and every other person Jack Voss harmed. Your willingness to stand up and testify despite the personal cost, that matters. That shows the jury this is about justice, not revenge. Cole spent the next month preparing for trial, meeting with Harrison and the territorial prosecutor to go over his testimony, to anticipate the defense's attacks, to learn how to present truth in a way that courtrooms required. It was harder than fighting in its way, sitting still while lawyers asked the same questions 20 different ways, trying to trap him in contradictions or force him to admit uncertainties that would undermine the case. Clara and Nora went through the same process, their testimony even more crucial than Cole's. Clara handled it with rigid composure, answering every question with careful precision. Nora bristled at the formality, wanted to speak plainly about her brother's crimes, but learned to channel her fire into controlled responses that wouldn't give the defense ammunition. The night before the trial began, Cole found himself at Wade's grave again, the spring evening soft and the grass thick around the weathered cross. "Tomorrow it starts," he said to the silent earth. "Everything you worked for, everything you died for, it all comes down to 12 people in a courtroom deciding what's true and what's justice. I hope you were right about the law being stronger than the gun. Hope truth is enough." The wind moved through the new grass, carrying no answers. "I met with your Clara. She's stronger than she knows, stronger than she believes. Her testimony is going to matter, going to help people see what Jack really is beneath all that money and power." Cole pulled out the compass, watched the needle settle. "And Nora, she's got your fire, your unwillingness to accept wrong, just because it's easier. Between the two of them, they're going to make Jack pay for what he did to you." He stayed until full dark, then walked back to town under stars that looked the same as they had the night Wade died, indifferent to human struggle and human justice. The trial opened on a Tuesday morning with half the territory packed into the courthouse and twice as many gathered outside, unable to fit in the gallery. Judge Harrison presided from the bench with stern dignity, making clear from the start that he'd tolerate no disruption and no theatrics from either side. Jack sat at the defense table looking thinner than he had 2 months ago, but still defiant, still carrying himself like a man who believed in his own invincibility. His lawyers were expensive suits from back east, men who knew every legal trick and had no compunction about using them. The prosecution laid out its case methodically. Wade's journal, Jack's private ledger, testimony from Mrs. Morrison about her captivity, statements from small ranchers about intimidation and theft. Each piece of evidence built on the others, creating a comprehensive picture of systematic criminality. Then the defense began its counterattack. They painted Wade as an obsessed man, driven by jealousy over Jack's success and romantic interest in Clara. They suggested Wade had fabricated evidence, that his journal was creative writing rather than factual documentation. They questioned Mrs. Morrison's mental state after months of captivity, implying her memories were unreliable and her testimony suspect. When Clara took the stand, they were brutal. Jack's lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Thornton who smiled while delivering his questions like knife cuts, asked about her relationship with Wade, about whether she'd given him the ledger out of spite against her brother, about whether family resentment had clouded her judgment. "Miss Voss," Thornton said smoothly, "isn't it true that you were romantically involved with Wade Holloway and that your brother disapproved of this relationship?" Clara's hands tightened on the witness rail. "Wade and I were friends. Whether there was more than that is irrelevant to the crimes my brother committed. But it does speak to your motivations for testifying, doesn't it? A woman scorned, angry at her brother for interfering in her personal life, perhaps willing to exaggerate or fabricate evidence to punish him." "I'm not fabricating anything. Everything I've testified to is the truth." "Your truth, certainly. But truth can be subjective, can it? Especially when filtered through the lens of personal grievance and romantic disappointment." The prosecutor objected. Judge Harrison sustained it, but the damage was done. The jury had seen Clara falter, had heard the suggestion that her testimony might be motivated by something other than justice. Nora fared better on the stand. her fierce honesty and obvious anger at her brother's crimes coming across as genuine rather than calculated. But Thornton managed to portray her as a reckless young woman given to dramatic gestures, someone who'd turned against her family not from principle, but from a desire for attention and excitement. Then it was Cole's turn. He walked to the witness stand feeling every eye in the courtroom on him, aware that his testimony could tip the balance toward conviction or create enough doubt for acquittal. He swore to tell the truth and sat down, meeting Judge Harrison's gaze. The prosecutor took him through the basic facts: his friendship with Wade, the letter that brought him to Redemption Flats, his investigation into Wade's death. Cole answered clearly and concisely, sticking to what he knew rather than what he suspected. Then Thornton stood for cross-examination, and the real battle began. "Mr. Mercer, you're known throughout several territories as a gunfighter, correct?" "I've been called that." "How many men have you killed?" The prosecutor objected. "Relevance, Your Honor?" "I'm establishing the witness's character and credibility," Thornton said smoothly. "The jury has a right to know what kind of man is testifying against my client." Harrison considered, then overruled the objection. "Answer the question, Mr. Mercer." Cole looked at the jury, saw them waiting. "I don't keep count, maybe 20, maybe more. Most were self-defense or during the war. Some were men I was hired to kill when other methods of resolution had failed." Hired to kill. Thornton repeated it, letting it hang in the air. "So you're a professional killer, a man who sells his gun to the highest bidder." "I was. I came here hoping to leave that behind." "Convenient timing. Your old friend Wade Holloway writes asking for help, and you arrived just after he's murdered. Tell me, Mr. Mercer, did Wade hire you to kill Jack Voss?" "No." "Are you certain? Perhaps the letter contained instructions you haven't shared with this court?" "Wade asked me to help him with his ranch. That's all." "And yet within days of arriving, you were engaged in armed conflict with my client's employees, conducting illegal raids on private property, and ultimately leading a violent assault that resulted in deaths and the burning of ranch property." Thornton's voice was sharp now. "That doesn't sound like ranch work, Mr. Mercer. That sounds like exactly what a hired killer would do." "I was trying to finish what Wade started, trying to find justice for his murder." "Justice? Or revenge? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you came to town with violence in mind and simply found excuses to unleash it." Cole forced himself to stay calm, to not let Thornton provoke him into anger that would undermine his credibility. "I came here hoping for peace, but when I found Wade dead and saw what Jack Voss was doing to this territory, I couldn't walk away. Wade believed in law and justice. I tried to honor that." "By breaking the law? By stealing private documents? By leading an armed raid?" Thornton shook his head. "Mr. Mercer, I suggest that you're not interested in justice at all. You're interested in imposing your will through violence, just as you've done your entire adult life. And now you're trying to use this court to legitimize your actions by destroying my client's reputation." The prosecutor objected, and Harrison sustained it, but again the damage was done. The jury had heard Thornton's characterization, had seen Cole's violent past laid bare. The trial continued for 3 more days. Expert witnesses testified about the ledgers and whether the handwriting was genuine. Character witnesses spoke for and against Jack. The prosecution and defense delivered their closing arguments, each painting vastly different pictures of the same events. Then the jury retired to deliberate. Cole sat in the courthouse hallway with Clara and Nora, waiting while 12 strangers decided whether Wade's death would be avenged through law or whether Jack would walk free to rebuild his empire. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky. People came and went, but the 3 of them stayed, bound together by their testimony and their hope that justice might actually prevail. Finally, as evening shadows stretched long across the floorboards, the bailiff emerged. Juries reached a verdict. The courtroom filled quickly, people pressing in to hear the outcome of a trial that had gripped the entire territory. Cole found himself holding his breath as the jury foreman stood, a weathered rancher named Peterson, who'd spent the trial taking careful notes. "On the charge of murder in the death of Wade Holloway," Peterson said, voice steady, "we find the defendant guilty." The courtroom erupted, people shouting, some in triumph and some in outrage. Judge Harrison's gavel crashed down repeatedly, demanding order. "On the charges of kidnapping and false imprisonment," Peterson continued when silence was restored, We find the defendant guilty. On the charges of cattle rustling, conspiracy, and fraud, we find the defendant guilty on all counts. Cole felt something release in his chest that had been locked tight since the moment he'd held Wade's dying body. Not joy exactly, but relief. The system had worked. Truth had won. Jack Voss sat motionless at the defense table, face pale, finally understanding that his money and power and connections hadn't been enough to escape the consequences of his actions. Judge Harrison addressed the courtroom with grave formality. Jack Voss, you've been found guilty by a jury of your peers of crimes that strike at the heart of civilized society: murder, kidnapping, systematic theft, and corruption. You used your position of power not to build and protect, but to destroy and steal. You turned law into a weapon and made good people fear for their lives and livelihoods. He paused, letting the weight of it settle. This court sentences you to hang by the neck until dead for the murder of Wade Holloway. Additionally, you are sentenced to 20 years hard labor for the kidnapping of Ruth Morrison to run consecutively. Your property and assets are hereby forfeit to compensate your victims and to fund the rebuilding of what you destroyed. Jack finally reacted, lurching to his feet. You can't. This is a travesty. I'll appeal. I'll take this to the Territorial Supreme Court, to the federal courts if necessary. You may appeal all you like, Harrison said coldly, but you'll do so from a cell. The sentence is immediate and final. Bailiff, remove the prisoner. They dragged Jack away, still protesting, still convinced that somehow his wealth and connections would save him. But Cole could see in his eyes that he knew the truth. His empire had fallen, his crimes were exposed, and no amount of money could buy back what he'd lost. Outside the courthouse, the spring evening had turned to full dark. Stars showed bright overhead, and the air smelled of new grass and possibility. Clara and Nora stood together, Clara weeping quietly while Nora held her sister with fierce protectiveness. It's over, Clara said. Finally over. Wade would be proud of you, Cole told her. Both of you. You did what he couldn't. You stood up in public and told the truth regardless of the cost. The cost was everything, Clara said. Our family name, our home, our future, we're outcasts now. Nobody will associate with the sisters who destroyed Jack Voss. Some people won't, Nora corrected. But the ones who matter, the ones Wade fought for, they'll remember what you did. They'll remember you chose justice over family loyalty, chose truth over comfort. Miguel Torres approached, hat in hand, followed by Sam Bridger and a dozen other small ranchers who'd suffered under Jack's reign. Miss Voss, Miguel said to Clara, I wanted to thank you for your courage, for standing up when it would have been easier to stay silent. My family won't forget what you did. Others echoed the sentiment, pressing around to shake Clara's hand and offer their gratitude. Cole saw her expression shift from despair to something more complicated. Recognition that while she'd lost one kind of family, she'd gained another. The community of people who valued her courage more than her last name. Sheriff Tate found Cole as the crowd dispersed. Quite a day. That it was. Judge Harrison wants to see you tomorrow morning. Something about a job offer. Cole looked at him sharply. What kind of job? The kind where you pin on a badge and help keep the peace legally instead of through raids and gunfights. Tate's expression was neutral. Territory's growing, changing. We need men who understand both the old ways and the new. Men who can bridge the gap between frontier justice and civilized law. I'm not a lawman. You could be. Wade thought so. I'm starting to think he was right. But Cole thought about it, staying in Redemption Flats, becoming part of the community instead of just passing through, using his skills to protect rather than destroy, building something that might last beyond the next gunfight or the next drift to a new town. I'll think about it, he said finally. Fair enough. But Mercer, don't think too long. Good men who'll stand up against evil are rare. This territory needs all it can get. Cole walked through town as night deepened, past the burned ruins of the doctor's office that were already being rebuilt, past Wade's old boarding house, where someone new was renting his room, past the saloon where men were celebrating Jack's conviction with whiskey and loud voices. He found himself at the livery where his horse stood in a stall, saddled and ready to ride. He could leave tonight, be gone before morning, drift back into the territories where nobody knew his name or expected anything from him. But he thought about Wade's compass in his pocket, about Clara and Nora rebuilding their lives from ruins, about Deputy Coleman learning to be a better lawman by watching how others faced hard choices. He thought about the small ranchers who could finally work their land without fear, about Mrs. Morrison recovering slowly in a safe house, about a whole territory beginning to believe that justice might actually mean something. He unsaddled his horse and turned it out into the corral. The next morning, Cole met with Judge Harrison in Sheriff Tate's office. The judge studied him with those sharp eyes, then slid a badge across the desk. Territorial Marshal, Harrison said. Authority to operate throughout the territory, jurisdiction over crimes that cross county lines, answerable directly to the governor's office. It's a new position, created specifically to handle situations like what happened here with Jack Voss, criminals who hide behind legal boundaries and local corruption. Cole looked at the badge, at the symbol of law and order that he'd spent most of his life on the wrong side of. I'm not sure I'm the right man for this. I'm quite sure you are. You've proven you can fight when necessary, but also that you value legal process over personal vengeance. You know the territory, know the kind of men who prey on the weak, and you have the respect of people like Wade Holloway and Sheriff Tate, which tells me you're better than your reputation suggests. Harrison leaned forward. The territory is changing, Mr. Mercer. We're moving from frontier chaos towards something more civilized. We need men who can help manage that transition, who understand both worlds and can navigate between them. Cole picked up the badge, felt its weight. And if I take this, what happens to my past? All the men I killed, all the questionable things I did before I came here. The past is the past. What matters is what you choose to do going forward. Harrison's voice was firm. Wade Holloway believed you could be more than a gunfighter. Clara and Nora Voss trusted you enough to risk everything. Sheriff Tate is willing to work alongside you. The question is whether you believe in yourself enough to try. Cole thought about Wade bleeding out in his arms, about the promise he'd made to finish what his friend had started. He thought about justice prevailing over power, about truth winning despite the odds. He thought about the compass pointing toward home and realized that maybe home wasn't a place you found. It was something you built through choices and commitment and the willingness to stand for something larger than yourself. I'll take it, he said, pinning the badge to his shirt. For Wade, and for everyone else who believed the law could matter more than the gun. The weeks that followed brought change to Redemption Flats and the surrounding territory. Jack Voss's ranch was sold at auction, the proceeds distributed to his victims. Clara and Nora used their share to start a school for children of the small ranchers, teaching reading and arithmetic in a building they converted from an old storehouse. Mrs. Morrison reunited with her husband, who'd been hiding in the mountains afraid of Jack's retribution, and together they reclaimed their homestead. Cole rode circuit as territorial marshal, settling disputes and tracking down rustlers, and generally making it clear that the old ways of solving problems through violence were ending. It was hard work, dangerous work, and there were days when he questioned whether he'd made the right choice. But then he'd return to Redemption Flats and see what the territory was becoming. Safer, more hopeful, moving towards something better than frontier chaos. And he'd know Wade's death had meant something after all. 6 months after the trial, Cole found himself at Wade's grave on a cool autumn evening. Someone had replaced the wooden cross with a proper headstone, carved with Wade's name and the dates of his too short life. Below that, an inscription. He fought for justice and died believing truth would win. It did win, Wade, Cole said quietly. Not the way you planned, not without cost, but it won. Jack's gone. Your killers paid for what they did, and the people you fought for are building better lives. Your Clara and Nora are running that school you always talked about starting. The small ranchers are thriving. The territory is becoming what you believed it could be. He pulled out the compass, watched it settle, pointing north toward the mountains. I'm staying, like you asked me to. Took that marshal's badge, and I'm trying to do right by it. Some days I'm good at it, some days I'm not. But I keep trying, keep working to be the man you thought I could be instead of just the killer I was. The wind moved through the grass, carrying the smell of distant snow and changing seasons. Cole stood there as the light failed, talking to his dead friend and feeling the weight of the badge on his chest, the responsibility of the oath he'd taken. He wasn't the same man who'd ridden into Redemption Flats 6 months ago, broken and running from his past. That man had been buried somewhere between Wade's grave and Jack's trial, replaced by someone trying to build a future worth having. It wasn't perfect, Violence still found him sometimes, situations where his guns were the only answer that worked, but he used them differently now, as tools of last resort rather than first response, in service of law rather than personal gain. And each time he walked away from a conflict without pulling iron, each time he talked instead of shot, he felt himself moving further from the man he'd been and closer to the man Wade had believed in. As full dark settled over the cemetery, Cole turned to leave. He'd ride back to town, file his reports, maybe stop by Clara's school and see how the children were learning. Tomorrow he'd head west to investigate rustling reports near the territorial border. Next week, Judge Harrison wanted him in the capital to testify about establishing more marshal positions across the territory. It was a life Wade would have approved of. Not peaceful exactly, not free from danger or struggle, but honest, purposeful, moving toward something better than the endless drift of his previous existence. Cole Mercer. No longer just the gunfighter, no longer just Wade's avenging angel, but something new. Walked out of the cemetery under stars that seemed brighter than they had in years. Behind him, Wade's grave stood peaceful in the darkness, the inscription catching moonlight like a promise kept. The territory stretched vast and wild around Redemption Flats, full of hard people doing hard work in unforgiving country. But it was changing, slowly becoming a place where law mattered and justice wasn't just a word the powerful used to justify their actions. Where men like Wade Holloway could fight for what's right and have that fight mean something. Where even a killer could find redemption if he was willing to work for it. Cole's horse stood waiting at the edge of town, patient and ready. He mounted up, felt the familiar weight of his guns balanced by the newer weight of the badge. The compass in his pocket pointed north, but Cole turned his horse west toward the open range and the work that waited there. He'd come to the territory hoping to bury his violent past. Instead, he'd buried his friend, and in doing so had found something worth fighting for beyond money or reputation. Wade's belief in truth and justice had won, but only because people had been willing to stand up and fight for it, to pay whatever price that victory demanded. The price had been steep. Wade's life, Jack's empire, the Voss family torn apart, blood and fire and suffering. But what they'd bought with that price was a future where the weak weren't automatically crushed by the strong, where evidence mattered more than money, where one good man's stand could change the course of a whole territory. Cole rode into the darkness, carrying that future forward, no longer running from who he'd been, but finally moving toward who he might become. The gun was still on his hip, would always be there because this was still hard country that sometimes required hard solutions. But it wasn't the only answer anymore. Not the first choice or the easiest path. Law had proven stronger than the gun, at least this once. Truth had won over fear. And Cole Mercer, the man who'd lived by violence for so long, had discovered that there were things worth more than survival. Things like justice and honor and the memory of a good man who'd believed in both. Wade Holloway could rest easy now. His fight was finished, his vision vindicated, his faith in a better future justified by the territory he'd helped shape even in death. And Cole, the friend who'd arrived too late to save him, but just in time to finish what he'd started, rode on into the night, carrying that legacy forward into whatever came next. The frontier was changing, becoming something new. Cole Mercer was changing with it, one hard choice at a time, leaving behind the man who'd once solved every problem with a gun and becoming the marshal who fought for Wade's dream of a territory governed by law instead of fear. It wasn't the peaceful life he'd come here hoping to find, but it was something better, a life that mattered, built on the foundation Wade had laid with his courage and sealed with his blood. The story that had begun with a dying man in Cole's arms ended with a living man riding toward dawn, carrying justice forward into a territory that finally believed truth could win after all.